If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon, link is in the description. Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200 plus audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon, link is also provided in the description.
Chapter 21. 282 AC. It has been exactly 2 years since I started focusing on my training. I have become 8.5 years old now. It has been a tiring year, but it paid off. I have made minor advancements in arcane arts and many advancements in my training in weapon arts and learning. In spells, I didn't make much advancement. I still can't use a second level spell, but I have made some advancements. Now I have 45 mana, and I'm more sensitive to mana. I can sense the mana sources around me too. Before, I could sense Godswood's mana, but I could only guess its source and not sense its core. Now I can sense the deep and old magic bound to the weirwood tree. I can't comprehend the depth of this magic yet, but I can sense some aspects of it. For example, it has earth, fire, water, and blood elements in it. Blood is not exactly an element, but it takes the space of an element in this ritual. I can sense the life and resentment inside it. I think this is what a blood sacrifice feels like. An unwilling being was sacrificed for this ritual, a human and not any human, an enemy. That is all I can sense for now. As for my familiars, they have started to become so big. Now Erebus is at least 20% bigger than any other raven, and Poe is a bit smaller than him. Because of the constant training, my soul space got bigger, too, and I think I will be able to get a third bound in a few weeks. As for my martial training, I wanted to learn how to use other weapons so I could predict what my enemies could do with them, started training with spear and mace too. At first, it was really hard to adjust to fighting with a spear because it is the exact opposite of a sword fight. In a sword fight, you would want to close the distance, but with a spear, you have to keep the distance so you wouldn't be left with a stick rather than a spear. In time I got used to it and started to see the advantage of a spear in a fight. Then I started using mace too. It was the hardest to use. Not because it is so technical or anything like that. It is hard because of the weapon's weight and is slow but deadly. As for my archery, I become really deadly with it. I still can't pull a longbow but can pull a short hunting bow easily. So I don't have the distance the grown-ups have. A longbowman can shoot an arrow around 3 times my best distance. I can shoot 100 meters, 110 yards, but I'm not accurate at all. I become accurate in 80 meters, 88 yards, and in 60 meters, 66 yards, I'm deadly. If I have to run and shoot, that distance becomes 40 meters, 44 yards. I'm learning how to use many weapons, and I'm going to learn many more, but I still like the sword because it is almost the perfect close weapon. It's not unwieldy like a mace, and it is not cumbersome in tight spaces like a spear or short-reached like a dagger. It is just perfect. Because I have made a lot of advancement in my martial training, at last Roderick accepted me as his squire, but I'm different than other squires. I don't have to do squire chores but accompany him when he goes to missions. I put my hand on my waist, held my head high, and said to myself, it is really hard to be this talented. I really love my skills. I got out of my room and went to the training grounds for the squires. When I reach there I see a lot of squires is there and working on their form or sparring. I even see my old friends Hallis and Will there too. They look at me from a distance and follow me with their eyes, but they don't try to come near me because they know better not to test me. Now I'm a squire. As long as it is under the pretext of a spar or training, I can beat the living daylight from them without getting punished. Thanks to our old pal Ned. The fact I just destroyed a 13-year-old just yesterday might have something to do with it too. Today I'm going to spar with a 15-year-old, Roderick, trying to take me down a peg. He thinks I have become too arrogant and conceited. Last few weeks, he only let me spar with boys that will definitely beat me. The boy I'm going to fight today is called Wyland Flant. He is the big brother of Will Flant, and he is the one with bruised ego and balls. I don't really like how the big bro Flant looks at me from the sidelines. It has been more than 2 years already. Why the hell are they still holding a grudge? It is not like little Will was permanently damaged, he already healed 1 year ago. We took our places in the middle of the sparring arena, people around us started to stop what they were doing and started watching the match. I took my form and waited for the attack. He started circling around me, but he only made fake lunges and looked for holes in my defense. Either he saw me fight, or someone gave him a lot of info because he started going for my biggest weakness against older boys. My lack of strength compared to theirs. Chapter 22. 282 AC. He was stronger than me. If this was 2 years ago, I would have lost to him after a few exchanges because of the power difference, but now I have made tremendous progress with my sword training, and with the help of buffs, now I'm able to fight 13 to 14 years old boys to a standstill, but I have never fought against a teenager before, but I have to fight him so I can get what I'm promised. As my base stats, I have 2.6 STR and 2.8 SPD with 0.5 buffs to both. I reach 3.1 and 3.3, respectively. The buffs don't show any visual effects, and their effects are internal. The only way for someone to know is by being sensitive to mana. I have seen Wyland fight with others his age, so I had an excellent estimate of his power level. He has 3.5 STR and 3.3 SPD, he is a lot stronger than me even when I'm buffed, but we have the same speed when I'm buffed. So I cast my buffs Valhan Grives, aspect of bear, and Valhan Kelly, aspect of cat, second after my buffs took effect, his and my sword clashed. I acted like he was forcing me back. I let him push me around a bit for a few moves, but I was mostly in control. What the hell are you mumbling, you weirdo? Every time he was striking, I was angling my sword a bit to the side so his force would dissipate a bit but not so much that he would notice. I could feel every strike vibrate through my hands. It shook my bones, and my hands hurt greatly, but I had to fight like this. I have to bide my time for an ambush, a counter-strike. In the last 2 years of training, I realized something. To most, it might look obvious, but realizing something and implementing something to a fighting style is completely different. You don't fight strength with strength, you can fight hardness with softness. If your opponent is stronger than you need to be fluid like water or elusive like the wind. If he is in a hurry and not stronger, you need to be as hard as a boulder. Be unmoving if you are striking. You need to be explosive and volatile like fire. This way, you can disturb their rhythm. In most fights, if you control the rhythm, you will control the fight. In this fight, I'm going to be like water. I'm going to let every strike flow around me. Wyland was starting to get cocky, thinking I wasn't able to strike back. I was in control, but he did not realize that thanks to how I positioned myself and where I dodged, he was only doing high strikes to the head and upper torso, he was becoming predictable without realizing. It was like there was a phantom moving a few seconds before he moved and showed me how he would move. It was like I was reading an open book. I saw all of his subtle movements. I could see on his face he was starting to become annoyed and frustrated. He got ready to do a diagonal cut to the left side of my neck and was ready for that. I held my sword in my left hand while putting my right hand to my sword's flat side and acted like I was going to block the strike. When he saw that, he smirked. He knew he was stronger than me, so he trusted his biggest assets, size and power. When his strikes were a few centimeters away from me, I did a big backstep, and I could see his eyes going big with surprise. He tried to adjust his swing, but he was struck with such force because he thought I was going to block. He wasn't able to take a forward step to chase me. So his sword swished past the tip of my nose with 1 centimeter, because he missed with such force he lost all of his balance. Then I put my sword at his neck and waited for him to give up. He was looking at me, all angry and unwilling to accept it, but he took a deep breath, then did a heavy sigh and said, "It is your win today, but I'm not going to underestimate you next time." I turned around and looked at Roderick with eyes full of expectation. He looks at me, then looks at Wyland like he is going to eat him alive. Wyland saw this and took his leave really fast. To me, it looked like his SPD became 10 for a second. He must have warned him to use all of his power from the start. He started scratching the back of his head and said, "Okay, I will talk to the Lord about the hunting and gate pass. I still think it is too early for you to leave the castle, but a promise is a promise, and I will only do that after you spar with me for a bit. This is not fair. Why do I have to do something I know is futile? You just said a promise is a promise. Why are you suddenly adding new conditions? It is %100 that I'm going to lose. Of course, you are going to lose, you brat. I didn't get old enough to lose against a snot-nosed kid. I will talk to Lord even when you lose. We are not sparring for that. Now come here, or are you that scared to fight this old man? Humph, do you really think that kind of provocation going to work on me, old man? For the record, Sir Selmy is far older than you, but no one in their right mind would fight him one-on-one. Ha ha ha, fair enough, you are right, snotty brat. Now come at me however you want. Chapter 23. I don't think Roderick wants to spar just because he wants to beat me black and bloody. So, I don't think he is going to use any real power while fighting me. I think he is going to use power close to mine while fighting me. I pulled my sword out of its scabbard. I came close to him and threw my scabbard at him. He used his sword to deflect it at that moment. I closed the distance and attacked his pivot leg with a lunge. He looked surprised but just sidestepped. That hole, he used 4.2 SPD just now. There is no way for me to catch him. Whoa, that was dangerous. Who taught you to fight dishonorable? There is no such a thing as fighting dishonorably, and there is only dead or alive in a sword fight. Now I know he is going to fight however he likes. He is not going to let me hit him. I have to fight him with everything I have. I wasn't going to show him this yet, but it looks like I have to. I took a deep breath and started a non-stop onslaught against him, but all I could see on his face was amusement. When he was getting comfortable with my speed and attack pattern, I pulled a small dagger, smaller than a palm, and threw it on his foot. It hit, but it did next to nothing because it didn't have an edge. This is a training dagger like our swords. They don't have an edge, but it should hurt a little if it hits. But that 1 second of distraction was all I needed. I attacked his torso with a stab, but he defended it with a parry, but I was starting to get used to his rhythm and was starting to see the phantom. I decided to use one more of my trump cards and pulled something from my pocket. When I saw him move right away, understood where he was going to strike. It was going to be a horizontal slash to the right side. I threw what I had in hand to the ground, and it exploded in a cloud of thick white smoke and shielded me from his sight. Then I dived to the left side to get away from the slash and tried to slash his arm with a diagonal cut, but after I released my slash, I sensed something next to my throat, and it was his sword. When the smoke dissipated, I saw a small nick on his arm, but he got my neck. POV Roderick. This boy is a force of nature. 2 years ago, he insisted on not training with other squires until he became one. In 2 years, he becomes strong enough to beat teenagers, but he still has a significant flaw in his fighting style. He trusts his sight and ability to read his opponent too much. He had never fought against a master swordsman before. Yes, he fought against Lord and me several times, but those were child's plays. I have to give him a lesson about deep feints. He thinks if you see a muscle move or notice a change in stance means an attack, but it is not. Real masters can move while faking their movements. These movements are not like basic feints. For example, I can act like I'm stepping in with my left foot to the left side while, in reality, that foot can be my pivot foot. All I need to do is bend my waist a bit to the left. This way, all my weight will fall on my left foot, and my center of gravity will shift. He does not know this kind of thing, but I can't believe I'm trying to teach something only seasoned and talented knights would understand or use to an 8 or almost 9-name-day-old child. If he had a grown man's body now, I think he would be the strongest fighter in the north. While I was in my thought, he came up to the arena and pulled his sword from its scabbard, and the next thing I knew, the scabbard was flying toward me. I deflected the thing and saw him lunging at my pivot leg. This little shit was going at me for real, and for a second, just for a second, I felt fear, so I got half serious and sidestepped. This freakish monster, how is an 8-name-day-old is this fast? As a joke, I said. Whoa, that was dangerous. Who taught you to fight dishonorably? There is no such a thing as fighting dishonorably. There is only dead or alive in a sword fight. This brat sometimes acts and talks like an old seasoned warrior. He is basically right. There is no honor in fighting, honor comes from whom or what you are fighting for. Right after this, he starts coming at me with an unending flurry of attacks, but all of the attacks are aimed at fatal or disabling spots. They are not at random. Suddenly I realized in 4 years. I don't think I could beat him. A smile crept on my face without me realizing it. When the fight started to get in a rhythm, he pulled something from his back and threw them at my foot, and I didn't have time to react to it. All of them fell on my pivot foot. It really hurt, but it wasn't something that did real damage. I thought about what would have happened if they were real daggers. I would be crippled now. This thought caused the fear to start boiling inside me, but I got focused again and started using deep feints. At that moment, I saw a little smirk start on his face. Humph, he thinks I'm going to use a horizontal slash to the right side, but it was the opposite of a horizontal slash to the left side. When I was sure the fight was over, he pulled something else and, this time, threw it to the ground, and a big white smoke bloomed from the ground like a curtain of fog. I lost sight of him for a second, and fear creeped right back out of me, so I got serious without realizing again. His sword came at me from the fog, so I continued my strike while backstepping. His sword nicked my arm, but it was over at that moment. All I could think about in 10 years was Cregan Stark, Dragon Knight, Arthur Dane, and Barry Stan Selmy. All those heroes are going to be remembered as second fiddle to this child. Chapter 24. 282 AC. I don't understand how I lost to him. I'm %100 sure he was going to do a horizontal slash to the right side. How did it turn into a horizontal slash to the left side? I can't understand. What, are you curious how right side slash turns into left side one? It is like he read my mind. Yes, how did you do it? It is called a deep feint. Usually, feints are done while acting like you are going to go for a strike, and you start the motion but stop it the next second. This kind of feint you can read, and you can read almost all of the squire's moves too, but the kind of feint I just used, the kind that changes the center of the movement, you have never seen it. So you are not able to fully understand it. So it has been 3 years since I started training with my 5x. It would be like training for 15 years. I thought I was becoming a sword master but was too arrogant. There are still many things I need to learn. There is something I'm curious too. What was the thing you threw to the ground? I call it smoke bomb. What is that? I don't want to tell you what it is made of. Why? It is my invention. Why should I give it for free? It is true I invented the smoke bomb here, but the thing I used was not the smoke bomb. The bomb wouldn't even be able to produce half the smoke I created. I used a first level spell called Sambrar, Fog Cloud, which created thick fog. The spell's cast range was long, I could cast it as far as 40 meters, 130 feet, and its effect range was 6 meters, 20 feet. It was a really useful spell, but I never needed to train on it. After I reached 45 mana, suddenly I just knew how to cast it, and I got a few more like it. Kalagana Nagrosa, Stop Bleeding, is minor healing magic that cauterizes a wound, but it does not heal damaged tissue so it won't fix big wounds, and even if it fixes a wound it will leave a big nasty scar. Inritio, Entangle, is a binding spell that can only be used in places with plants because it uses the plant to bind people. For example, if I have only weeds I can at best cause them to trip up, but if I have big trees around I can even bind their whole body with roots. Letagon, Snare, is similar to Inritio, but it does not bind with plant. Uses pure magic to bind enemies because Inritio has limitation in its use. It needs 5 mana to bind feet and 10 mana for whole body bind, but Letagon need 10 mana for feet binding and 20 mana for full body bind. When Roderick started talking, I came out of my deep thoughts. It could be really useful in a fight. I know it is useful, Sir Roderick. That is why I used it. Haha, you cheeky brat, at least now you know even these fancy things can't save you if you fare against a competent warrior. As I promised, I'm going to go and talk with the Lord about your passes. He was going toward the keep while mumbling and laughing by himself. If Lord Stark accepts it, I can, at last, leave the castle and explore around the castle and go hunting. I want to see if I can dominate bigger wild animals besides birds. Just as I was ready to leave the training grounds, the Stark children came and saw me. There was Rob, John, Sansa, and little Arya. Now Arya is 3 years old. She would always follow around Rob and John. If Sansa is the definition of an obedient and docile child for Lady Catelyn, Arya is the definition of a highborn beast. She hates everything to do with being a lady. If you make her angry, she will bite, claw, or climb over you. Most of the time, she will run away from the septa and come to the training ground and watch people spar. If she sees one person with a sword, her eyes would sparkle. I started playing with Rob and John. We would usually play tag or spar with our wooden swords, but we started using iron training swords last week. Like always, Sansa sits somewhere and watches us play, and Arya picks up a branch and tries to copy our movement. With a surprised look, Rob asks, "Did you earn a gate pass?" "Not yet, but Sir Roderick promised to ask Lord Stark and recommend that I get a gate pass." "Cool, I would really like to have a gate pass too. Why didn't the Lord promise he would take you guys hunting the next moon?" "Yes, but it isn't like we can get out of the castle whenever we want to, like you would be able to if you get your gate pass. Sometimes I really envy your life. Yee, being a commoner orphan is really a blast. Who wouldn't envy my life?" With an embarrassed look on his face, Rob got flustered and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that." "You know I didn't mean that, I just meant you are free to choose what you want, you don't have to do anything if you don't want to." "No, Rob, Everyone in life has to do things they don't want to. It is called living. You might think your life sucks because you have to learn a lot of things and can't do the things you want, but there are far worse things than having to listen to Maester Lewin's lectures for a few hours a day. Do you think the Salt Wives in Iron Island want to be there? Do you think people in Essos want to live as slaves? You really shouldn't say things like that. Embarrassed, Rob looks at the ground and says. You are right about that. I'm sorry. I really like this about Rob. He always accepts it if he is mistaken and learns from it. Chapter 25. 282 AC. I could see Rob had a newfound determination in him. I'm not going to whine about Maester Lewin's lectures anymore. As you said, there are things in life we have to do even if we don't want to. And he smiles at me. Sometimes teacher side of me gets out, and I start giving lectures about things, but it is beautiful to see a child learn and grow as a person. Rob, I want to learn how to use a sword, too, says Arya. You know you can't. Do you want mother to punish us all for teaching you? She gets angry and starts shouting, I hate you, hate mother, and hate being a lady. I don't want to be a lady like Sansa. I can't do anything about that. You need to convince mother or father about that, you little she-wolf. People start calling Arya a little she-wolf. When she started walking and getting into all kinds of trouble, she never acted like how a lady should act. I think I started seeing white hair in Lady Catelyn's hair because of Arya. Some people even say she is the Lioness Stark reborn. POV Ned Stark. What is the important thing you must discuss, Maester Lewin? It is about Air Drazzle, my lord. It come to my attention he has a very keen mind. We know of his martial prowess, but it is the first time I'm heard about his keen mind. Yes, my lord, he is a brilliant child. I would even call him a genius that comes once a century. I knew he had learned how to read and was doing readings in the library, he had asked for permission. But I didn't know he was that smart. Yes, he acts most of the time like a grown-up, but he still doesn't understand how this world works, so some of the things he does are just like a naive child. My lord, I didn't teach him how to read. All I did was show him how the alphabet works and how to voice the letters, and from that, he learned how to read and write. Since then, he has been reading all the books he can find. If Septon Kale didn't bring this to my attention, I wouldn't realize this. According to Septon Kale, he read almost 1/4 of Stark Library. When I heard that, I thought if he comprehended even 1/10 of the things he read, he would be a great maester when he grew, and I even put him in some tests. Then realized he didn't understand 1/10 of the things he read. He understood almost all of it. I was thoroughly shocked. How can someone be this talented in sword and pen? My lord, even if we send the boy to the citadel this instant, he can take the maester exam right away and forge at least 3 links of chains in history, herbology, and medicine. It was like bolts of lightning were striking my head continuously. How can a 9-year-old boy become a maester with 3 chains? Bang, bang, bang. The knock on the door took me out of my stupor, and I said, come in. Roderick came in, gave a salute, and stood in front of me. My lord, if you are available, could I inquire about some things? Roderick, it is good timing. We were talking about your squire too. The good Maester Lewin told me some unbelievable things about that child. Maester Lewin told everything to him too, but he didn't look as shocked as I thought he would be, so I asked. Roderick, you don't look that shocked about it. Why is that? My lord, maybe I become numb to getting shocked about Airmer. If on the morrow, someone tells me Airmer learned how to walk on water, I would say it was bound to happen if someone else said he learned to fly, and I would just say okay. The things that boy does no longer shocks me. I can't decide about this. If we send him to the citadel, yes, he would become a learned man, but at the same time, I would be giving the potential best swordsman the North has ever seen to the citadel. It is a no-brainer. We can't send him. I need to talk about this with Roderick, so Maester Lewin. Can you wait outside for a bit? He walks out of my solar, and Roderick closes the door, turns to me, and says, my lord, we cannot send Airmer to citadel, and it would be a crime against the North. I know, but we cannot refuse the citadel directly, or it will cause a lot of headaches to me and to all the northern lords. Do you think Airmer would want to go to the citadel? Not likely. Airmer likes his freedom, my lord. He even wants more of it. What do you mean? He wants to go out of the castle to hunt and explore. I even have some shocking news for you, my lord. What is it? Today, he has beaten the flant boy, my lord. That is not shocking. Didn't we have to give him punishment because he beat them so hard 2 years ago? Not Will, my lord, the big one, Wyland. What, isn't he almost knighted? Isn't he the one we considered knighting this OR the next year? Yes, my lord, that is him. Ha 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 ha, I'm too going to believe if someone says he can walk on water and fly. This boy is going to be a force of nature, and I'm not going to give him to Citadel even if I have to fight them to the bitter end. At most, we will keep getting letters from all the Westerosi lords, and we will have problems with our ravens. They won't show direct insubordination, but they will protest in a passive-aggressive way. Chapter 26 282 AC POV Ned Stark. Roderick, you should go and talk to him, sound him out if he would ever consider going to Citadel. Yes, but my lord, he is going to ask if he got his gate pass. What should I say about that? If he can beat 15-years-old squires, then he can defend himself against bandits and brigands, but he is still too young. Tell him I will give him permission to go by himself only when he is 10 years old. Until then, he can go out with other hunters and join you when you are going for safe patrols. He can maybe join you when you are going to suppress small bandit groups, but he can only observe and can't join the fray. Yes, my lord, I will go and talk to him right away. If his answer is negative, bring him here, but if he wants to join the Citadel, come without him and say you couldn't find him yet. I would need to talk to him first. Yes, my lord, I will do it right away. POV MC. Sometimes it is really fun to play with Stark kids. I have the mind of a 35-year-old, but I can find joy in playing children's games. Maybe it is because of my brain chemistry. It might be because I have the brain of a 9-year-old, and the most tragic thing is I'm 35 years old with a zero sex drive. One time I was passing by the brothel of Winterfell and saw a topless woman and felt nothing. It was like I was looking at the wall before I died. I wasn't a horn dog but a healthy man. If I saw a beautiful woman, I wouldn't stare, but I will at most turn and look one more time, but now I don't even realize a woman's beauty if I don't focus. I think this body is the reason I enjoy playing kids' games. I'm not crazy about them like Rob and John, but it isn't boring to me. It is a really weird feeling. I saw Roderick coming from a distance, and he shouted at me, "Airmer, come here for a second." "Sir Roderick, did you talk with the Lord?" "Yes, and I have an answer for you, but before that, I have to talk to you about something else. Would you ever want to be a maester?" I never thought about this, but I get a bad vibe about Citadel. I mean, no one exactly knows when the Citadel was established, but it should be at the very least 7,000 to 8,000 years old. But since the invention of steel 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, there was only one advancement in technology. Mir invented glass, that is all. How could there be no big invention for thousands of years? That is why the Citadel doesn't sit well with me. No, I don't want to be a maester. I still have many things to learn in Stark Library, didn't even read 1/4 of the books there. It would take me at least 4 to 8 years to finish it all. I don't need to go to the other side of the continent to learn. When I said that, a sudden smile started to creep on his face, and when I finished speaking, he laughed. "Yes, that is right, you don't need to go all that way to read some books. You can read all the books in the north. Let's go. Lord is waiting for us." When we reached Lord Solar, he and Maester Luwin were talking about something, and when we entered, they stopped. "Come in and sit down, Airmer." "So, I learned from Maester Luwin you are not only talented in swords, but you are talented at higher learning too." "Yes, my lord, I have talent in that area too." "So, he wants to make you a proposition." "Go ahead, Maester Luwin." "My boy, you must have understood when I saw you in the library and started giving you tests. I wanted to gauge how much of the things you read you understand. When I saw you understood almost all of it, I was horrified by your talent. We cannot let a mind like yours be a swordsman. You need to be at the Citadel and learn about the world's mysteries. If you come with me to the Citadel, we can unlock all of your potential. Thank you for your generous evaluation of my talent, but I do not want to be a maester. I can achieve the things Citadel offers by myself, so me going there would be a demerit for me." When I said those words, his face started to go sour, and he said, "My boy, did I evaluate you too high, or is this the naivete of the youth? How can you say going to the greatest place of learning in the known world is a demerit to you? Maester Luwin, this might look to you as naivete of youth, but to me, it makes total sense. Because I don't need teachers to learn things, I want to ask you something, but I want an honest answer. If a new maester and I compare knowledge in history, herbology, and medicine, which of us would have more knowledge? When he heard the question, his face became sourer, and he started coughing. He answered me, looking down, the maester would know a little bit more than you. Maester Lewin is a good man. He is not able to lie without being ashamed. So, I need to go all that road and spend all that time for that little bit of knowledge. No, thank you. I can get that knowledge while working in the field. Chapter 27. 282 AC. Maester Lewin was angry and sad because of what I said, but he accepted my decision and dropped the matter. After he left the room, I looked at Roderick and the Lord, they looked very pleased and happy. I turned around and faced them. My lord, I think Sir Roderick told you about the gate pass. He said he had an answer, but we came here in a hurry, so I couldn't hear them. I will give you permission to go alone only when you are 10. Until then, you can go out with other hunters and join Roderick when he is going for safe patrols. You can maybe join him when he is going to suppress small bandit groups, but you can only observe, can't join the battles. My lord, can I speak freely? I allow it. I can accept everything you say, my lord, but I want to hunt by myself. I don't want to go with others. I might be a child, but I'm not stupid. Everyone in this room knows I'm going to become the greatest swordsman this world knows, and I have no intention of dying young. If I face any danger, I will retreat, and even if I'm ambushed, I'm resourceful enough to get out alive. You could ask Roderick, he witnessed it. He is a bit shocked by my arrogant claim, but he turns to Roderick and looks at him with a questioning stare. Roderick, with a heavy sigh, even though I would like to refute it, my lord, he is right. The boy invented something he calls a smoke bomb, and it creates a fog curtain 7 meters, 20 feet, in diameter. If he used that, he wouldn't have any hardship running from bandits. I want to see this smoke bomb. I will decide after that. We got out to the balcony, and I took out a fake smoke bomb. Looking down, it was about a 10 meter, 33 feet, distance. I would have no problem casting, and I throw it down the balcony when it is about to hit the ground. I cast Sambrar, fog cloud. A big cloud of white smoke spreads rapidly 7 meters, 20 feet, in diameter. When Lord sees this, he is astonished by it. He gets inside and then sits on his chair for a few minutes. Then he gets up from his chair, slowly goes next to the fireplace, and starts playing with the burning timbers inside it. He doesn't say anything, but from his face, it is easy to understand he is deep in thought. After a few more minutes, he turns around and says, "Will you give us the production method of those things?" "I will not, my lord, it is not easy to make these things, but I will sell you a smaller version of it. It doesn't create as much smoke as this one, but it is much easier to make. The small ones can make smoke curtains 3 meters in diameter. Actually, it is really easy to make those things. Other than the sugar, every other material is cheap and easy to procure too, but I'm not going to waste my time making those. All you need is sugar, wax, flintstone, and snow tree bark for a real smoke bomb. I would need phosphorus, but I don't know where to acquire it. I know fertilizer has it, but I never learned how to distill it, so I needed something that could replace it, and I found it in a herbology book. A northern tree called snow tree. It is usually not used as firewood because if you burn it while it has its bark, it will drown the place it was burned in white smoke, so you need to peel it to use it as firewood. It needs more work than other trees, which is why they don't use it as firewood, but this bark becomes so useful for me when it is turned into a fine dust because it becomes highly flammable. If I make them orange size rather than golf ball size, they might create a smoke screen close to my spell in size, but they will become too cumbersome. Because I knew when I used it, someone was going to ask to buy it, I had used 60 gold dragons of my money to buy enough materials to make 1,000 of them. I spent 45 gold dragons on the sugar. The rest of the materials only took 13 gold dragons, and the last 2 gold dragons were used to lease storage for 2 years, and in the last 2 years, I had made around 300 of them. I have around 100 of them. I can sell 80 of them, my lord. I think 1 gold dragon is a fair price for this marvel. It is too expensive. I will give you half a dragon for it. For my lord, I will do this, 4 smoke bomb is 3 gold dragons. I mean, for every 3 of them, you get 1 free. He thought about a bit, then said, "Deal, bring the 80 of them, then you will get 60 gold dragons for it. As for the gate pass, I will give you one, but you can only use it at daytime. You will lose it if you do not come back before the sun goes down. I show a big smile and say with a happy voice, thank you, my lord. I cannot thank you enough, my lord. I bow down to him and leave the room. Chapter 28. 282 AC. Now that I got what I want, I can go out and explore the region, and most important part, I can go into the secluded areas like mountains and forests to do magical experiments. The dimensional space is too small for the experiments, and if I'm right, I'm going to need a lot of herbs and animals for those experiments, and I can't find all of them in the God's Wood. It is too small, most importantly, it is not secluded. I got into my room and opened the window. Poe and Erebus come inside now. I look at them carefully. They grew a lot these 2 years. Erebus became 2 times its old size. Before, he had a wingspan of 1.5 meters, 60 in, but now it is close to 3 meters, his length was 50 centimeters, 20 in, and now it is around 80 centimeters, 31 in. People started to think he was a black eagle now. Poe grew too, but not that much. She is bigger than normal ravens, but not that much. Her wingspan is around 2 meters, 80 in, and her length is around 60 centimeters, 24 in. She is almost eagle size too. They love standing on my shoulders while I meditate and circulate my mana, but they started to feel heavy on my shoulders. I think Erebus is almost 5 kilograms, 11 pounds, and Poe is 3 kilograms, 6.6 pounds. Holding them for hours is starting to feel taxing on my shoulders. I shoo them away, but whenever I focus on meditating or mana circulation, they land on my shoulder without me realizing it. Even when I kick them out and lock the latch on the window, they are smart enough to unlock it. Of course, I can force them not to do that or enter the space without them, but when I do those things, they become really sad. I can feel that, so I spoil them a bit. What can I say? I like the brats. I sit on the ground and start circulating my mana before becoming lost in my mana training. I feel them perching on my shoulders. This time the circulation is a bit different. Usually, it is like a vacuum cleaner. It sucks the mana to my heart, but this time it is like a vortex. No, that is not entirely right. It is more like a storm, and I'm at the eye of the storm. The mana keeps whirling around me without going inside my body, but with every passing second, there is more mana in the vortex. It keeps getting bigger and bigger. As it grows, it gets harder to control. I started to feel a bit of dread, like if I lost control of the mana, something bad was going to happen to me. The mana vortex starts to get unstable, it feels like I'm holding onto the ledge of a cliff with only my fingertips. As the vortex becomes unstable, I start to lose consciousness. To not lose consciousness, I bite down on my lips. I can feel the blood running down my throat, leaving a bitter, iron-like taste. But it works. The pain helped me focus, and I started to regain control of the vortex. As I gain more control, the vortex keeps getting compressed, and when I get full control of it, it becomes a disk of mana around me. Then it just dawns on me. I know what I have to do. I start compressing it more, but this time I compress its diameter too. At the end of it, it becomes a disk as big as my palm on top of my head. I get a hold of it with my mind and command it to go to my heart. It darts into my chest and takes its place around my heart, creating my mana core. The second the core takes its shape, I start to get new knowledge about ritual concepts and spells. I have become a level 2 druid now. At that moment, I hear the voice of a little boy. Stupid Ermer, don't stop giving us the delicious wind. And then I hear the voice of a little girl. Don't call daddy stupid. You are stupid. Who is that? Who said that? The boy said, did he just hear us? I realized I didn't hear the voices. The voices were coming to my head directly, and it was telepathic. Yes, I can hear you. Who is this? A/N, from now on, F something S between, 2 dashes, T means TS in Nervochi or telepathy. Stupid Ermer, I'm me. Who am I supposed to be other than me? Daddy can finally hear us. I'm so happy. You are stupid. I'm asking you your name. No, you are stupid, Ermer. I'm the smartest Erebus. Once I heard that, I turned around and looked at Erebus with a shocked face. I was able to communicate with them in more basic ways, and I knew they were as smart as 2 to 5 years old children in some aspects, but this is beyond that. Is this the effect of talk to animal spell? Did they learn to talk right now, or have I started to understand them now? We always spoke stupidly. Ermer didn't hear us before. Who are you calling stupid, you overgrown fat bird? He bit my ear and started flying away before I could catch him. Ah, come here, you asshole of a bird. I got up and chased him, but he flew out the window. Erebus, stop calling daddy stupid. How is Erebus's father? He doesn't have a beak or wings. He doesn't even have beautiful feathers like Erebus. He is so ugly, I don't even want to look at him. Daddy is the daddy. I knew Po was a good girl, like I expected Erebus to be an asshole. Then she continued speaking. He might be so ugly, but he is still daddy. You shouldn't bully daddy. The corner of my mouth started to twitch. You as well, Brutus. Should I go to the corner of the room and cry? Chapter 29. 282 AC. It was shocking at the start that my familiars can talk like humans, but as a druid, I expected to have something similar. It was easy to get used to it right away, but I liked it more before I couldn't understand Erebus. This idiot never stops speaking. Stupid Ermer, come on, give us more of that delicious wind. What wind? The wind you were eating when you were sitting. What the hell is he talking about? Is he talking about mana? Are you talking about this? I create a pure mana ball on my hand. Yes, give us more of that wind. This isn't wind. It is called mana. Yes, give us more of that wind mana. It is not, whatever, is this the reason you guys always perch on me when I train? Yes, I like eating that wind mana. So, this is the reason they are so much bigger than even the biggest of normal ravens. They are able to put mana in their body. I don't have time for that now, maybe later, and you can't keep perching on my shoulder. You are too fat now. I am not fat. Erebus is handsome and powerful. You are fat. You don't even know how to fly. Fat. 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 I can't act like a bird brain with a bird. I just had a big moment. I should focus on that. I have so much new knowledge, and thanks to the 5x, it is like I had 5 breakthroughs. I understand what happened so well now. Aerobula, air bubble, costs 15 mana, creates an air bubble around the head, and provides air for 6 hours. I could use this if I have to go underwater. It could be useful. Korsambi, Oak's Healed, is a defensive spell that creates a wood-like skin on top of my body. Teganlita, Earthbind, is a higher binding spell than Snare and Entangle. Promodines, locate animals, and Promohba, locate plants. Like the name states, if I see the kind of plant or animal looks like, I can locate them in 1 kilometer, 0.6 miles, but for this spell to work, I have to see a living specimen of that species before. Vocadini, Summon Beast, this spell lets me summon one of my familiars to where I'm, but the familiar need to be within a 20 kilometers, 12 miles, radius of me. I didn't get any attack spells. Is this mean I have enough of them, or am I not strong enough yet? With time we will see which one it is. This breakthrough even affected my body. My speed and strength grew too. Now I have 3 STR 3.2 speed, and my mana has become 65. I wonder if the buffs got stronger too. Valhen Grives, aspect of bear, Valhen Kelly, aspect of cat, the feeling I get when I use those buffs is so good. It is like a volcano is ready to erupt inside me. It is like my blood is heated but not in a painful way. I feel full of energy. Yes, the buffs got stronger too. Both of them provide 0.8 stats on speed and strength. I want to try every new spell, but I need to wait until I'm out of the city. I need my gate pass. I got up and got out of my room. Daddy, where are we going? If I talk out loud, it will look like I have gone crazy. If they can talk telepathically, I should be able to do it too. I started focusing on my familiar bounds and got a hold of both of the tethers, and tried to say what I wanted. We are going to the Valen pool. Stupid Ermer, why are you shouting? Sorry, it is my first time talking telepathically, I didn't know you could shout. As I said, we are going to see Steward of Winterfell so we can get our gate pass. What is a gate pass, Daddy? I needed to get out of the castle and get into the castle. Erebus started to mumble by himself again. Humph, he can't even fly and is ugly too. How can he be great R.O.B's father? I got into the keep and, reached the steward's door, knocked on the door. Come in. When I got inside, Valen was sitting on his chair behind his table and looking at some papers. His daughter Gina was here too, and she was tidying up his father's room. She is the same age as Sansa, and both of them are 6 years old. She looks at me momentarily, then returns to her work. I would like to get my gate pass if you can give it, please. He looks at me and sneers a bit, then takes out a plaque with a wolf on it. I reach out and get a hold of it. It is a bit heavier than I thought. When I held it, I realized it was made out of metal. The wolf is silver in color, but I don't think it is made out of silver, and the plaque itself could be bronze. It is smaller than my palm, and its shape is round. If you add a chain to it, it will make a good medallion. It is around 5 centimeters, 2 in diameter. After getting out of the steward's quarter, I need to go back to the town area, so I can get what I would need for the morrow. Chapter 30. 282 AC. At last, I managed to go out of the castle. I could have snuck out of the castle. But I don't think it would be worth it to clash with the Lord's order for something like this. We are in the summer, and the weather is sunny, but the temperature is not warm. It is more like autumn weather. I think it is around 10 to 15 degrees Celsius, it is a bit cold, but this is what passes as summer in the north. Because I wanted to hunt and try out my spells today, I bought a decent short bow and 20 arrows with wrought iron tips. The tips of the arrows are broadheads made for hunting and not steel, so they wouldn't penetrate armor fully, but they will penetrate and kill a medium-sized beast. For self-protection, I have a sword, a dagger, and a few throwing daggers. I have spent 3 gold dragons on all of them. It took me 1 hour to walk to Crofter's village. It is a small settlement right at the edge of Wolf's Wood. Bought some rations from the village. I had got out of the castle with the first lights of the day, and when I reached here, I think the time was around 6 a.m. The sun goes down at 7 p.m. So I have to leave from here at most around 6 p.m. It would leave me with 12 hours of time. Before I try my hand at hunting, I want to try out all of my new spells, especially the locator spells. I think they are going to make me a lot of money. Thanks to the R.O.B, locate plants, spell, if I have a memory of seeing a plant directly with my eyes without any medium, then I can use this spell to find it. I am going to hunt for every precious and helpful herb I can think of. For example, ginkgo trees can slow cognition decline, help with diabetes, and influences bone healing. Turmeric can be used as an anti-inflammatory treatment for arthritis, and it is delicious. Evening primrose oil and feverfew has good anti-inflammatory properties. Echinacea can be used to shorten the symptoms of the common cold because it has antibiotics in it. Lavender and chamomile are good anti-anxiety properties when used as a tea. The herbology in this world is worse than in medieval times on Earth. They don't even know lavender or chamomile effects. Maybe it is because this world doesn't have a tea culture, so they don't try to make tea from every freaking plant. So, I used the spell R.O.B, locate plants, ginkgo tree. When I said the words, I felt like a big wave started to move in every direction from me, but other than the loss of mana and the wave feeling, nothing else happened. But then I felt something. It is like a pull from one spot, and I can also see a glow effect, so there are ginkgo trees here. It took me a bit to reach one of the spots, but this is definitely a ginkgo tree. There are 10 of them, and I don't think there is their native place. I am thinking they must have come from some place with more rain than snow, like Riverland or the Reach, but ginkgos are resistant trees. They can live in cold areas as cold as -40 degrees Celsius. The Wolf's Woods are mainly made up of oak, evergreen, blackbriar, sentinels, soldier pines, hawthorn, beech, ash, chestnuts, ironwoods, and firs, meaning it is rich with timber and stone. I collect enough leaves for myself without hurting the trees. This wood is really big, I mean it is gigantic. I think it is around 800 square kilometers, 310 square miles. R.O.B, locate plants, turmeric, but nothing happens. I don't lose any mana, and there isn't a wave feeling. So it has a cooldown, and let's try another spell while waiting for its cooldown. Quarsambi, Oaks healed. When the casting finished, my right arm started to itch like crazy. Then I felt something grow under my clothes. I hurriedly pulled my shirt and saw a wood-like bracer around my right forearm. It looks like made out of oak bark, but when you touch it doesn't feel like wood. It is too hard. I am really curious about how hard it is, but I am not going to hack my arm with a sword. It looks 3 centimeters, 1 in, thick. So, I put my forearm on a big rock sideways so I wouldn't cut or nick my arm. I pull out my dagger from my waist and then start to put some weight on the bark armor on my arm. The dagger is not digging into the thing, but I am not using all of my strength either. When I lifted the dagger, there wasn't a hole or a dent in the armor but a white mark. This time I cast Valhan Greaves, the aspect of bear, and I put my dagger to the edge of the armor, used all of my power, and tried to break it. When it didn't work, then I pulled the dagger with a slashing motion. Screech. The sound that comes from it is not the sound that should be coming from steel against wood, it sounds more like steel against steel, but the armor has a few millimeters deep slash on it. I inspected my dagger to see if the armor damaged its edge, but it was not damaged. It still has a sharp edge but is not as sharp as the other side's edge. It becomes a bit dull, and I am not going to use my arm for a more dangerous experiment. So, I decided to use it on an animal I would catch. The spell's duration was 1 hour. After the time was up, it turned into rotten tree bark and fell off my arm. The next spell I am going to use is Vocatini, Summon Beast. To use this spell, I had left Erebus at Winterfell. It is not like I wanted a little peace and quiet, and it was for the experiment. So, if the spell has succeeded, it means I have enough mana for it. I know it has a range of 20 kilometers, 12 miles, but I don't know how much mana is needed. This spell did not have a specific mana cost. Vocatini, Summon Beast, Erebus. It feels like the space right next to me started to bend and started to whirl. After that, a black vortex appeared, then the vortex started to vibrate. In the next second, Erebus was flying right next to me, and the vortex was gone. In 5 kilometers, it took 15 mana to use it. If we go by that logic, in 20 kilometers, it should take around 60 mana. Chapter 31. 283 AC. If I want to prove my hypothesis about Vocatini, Summon Beast, I have to summon one of my familiars when I'm at the very least 6 kilometers distance to see if the mana cost goes up with a distance. Because of that, I told Erebus to fly back to Winterfell. He whined for a bit but listened to me and started to fly in the direction of Winterfell. After a few minutes disappeared on the horizon. In this world, ravens are the fastest communication method. To see the limits of a raven's speed and distance, I ran an experiment with the dominated ravens and my familiars to see if there was a difference and authenticated it. I made a few typical ravens, and my familiars fly around the circumference of Winterfell until they can't fly anymore. The conclusions were interesting. Typical ravens were able to fly at an average speed of 50 km per hour, 32 miles per hour, and could only fly around 100 km per day, 64 miles. Let's just say the ravens Maester Luwin is using are a bit special because I still can't dominate his ravens, and let's say they are at least %50 faster and have %50 more stamina than typical ravens because I tried to chase them with usual ravens, but they weren't even able to come close to them, but Poe and Erebus are able to easily catch them, and they are the ones always getting tired before my familiars. So they must be slower and have less stamina than my familiars. Poe's average speed is around 100 km per hour, and she can fly around 150 km per day, 96 miles. Erebus is slower but has more stamina. His average speed is 85 km per hour, 52 miles, and he can fly around 200 km per day, 128 miles. So I would say the ravens Maester Luwin is using have around 60 to 75 km per hour speed, and they can travel around 100 to 140 km per day. I tried to cast Promohba, locate plants, turmeric, and the magic cast successfully. I think it has around 30 minutes cooldown. The wave of energy left me, and I waited for a feeling of pull, but it didn't come, so there wasn't any turmeric in at least a 1 kilometer radius of me. I can't try spells until I meditate or sleep for at least 6 hours because I have only left with 5 mana. So I sat down on a rock and tried to feel the mana around me, tried to control and sense it more while Poe and her murder of ravens and crows were working as a lookout so I wouldn't get ambushed by a predator or bandits. A/N, from now on, I am just going to say her ORHS murder. Ts too much of a mouthful to say murder of crow and ravens all the to me. After I got all of my mana back, it was already past noon, and I was hungry, so I had to eat something and decided I wasn't going to only eat bread and cheese I got from Crofter's village. I want some meat too. So, I cast Promodines, locate animals, rabbit. After the wave of energy, I started to feel the pull from everywhere. There were at least 60 to 70 spots, and the closest one was around 20 meters away. I climbed on top of a tree and looked at the place. Thanks to my enhanced vision, I was seeing like I had a binocular. I can't see the rabbit, but I'm able to see the movement of the long grasses. Climbed a bit more so I could get a better footing between the two big branches, and I leaned my back against the trunk of the tree, pulled an arrow from my quiver, and nocked it. While taking a deep breath, I pulled the string and stopped breathing to steady my aim, and I was aiming right at the feeling I was coming from. When I was ready, I let loose the arrow, and it got lost between the tall grasses, but the spot shown by the spell was no more there if the other spots had been gone too. I could have thought the duration was over, but other spots were still there. Only this spot was over. I think it means the rabbit died. Jumped down the tree and ran there. When I reached there, I started looking into the tall grasses and found a brown rabbit with an arrow shot through its chest. I cleared a patch of ground and put some rock in a circle to create a campfire, then collected enough dry wood to cook the rabbit, but before, I had to skin and clean it. That was a bit weird, the feeling of the squishy innards of the animal, and I literally butchered the animal. It was in pieces. No one would give any money for this rabbit if they were not starving, it had so many knife marks on its meat, and the leather was useless. It was in many small pieces, and I could skin it in one piece. This was my first time skinning and cleaning an animal. It doesn't look presentable, but it is edible. So I started a fire with the snap of my finger, put the rabbit pieces on some sticks, and then stabbed them to the ground right next to the fire. It took some time and was a bit bland because I didn't buy any seasoning, but there isn't much seasoning in the north, anyway. I cut my bread from the middle, deboned half of the rabbit, and put it inside the bread with some cheese. It was good, but the seasoning was missing. I really miss black and red pepper because the soil here gets close to freezing temperatures. Pepper cannot grow here, and it needs to be imported from Essos or the Reach. Chapter 32. 283 AC. After a filling meal and putting out the campfire, I wanted to hunt in a different manner than the locator spell. This time I wanted to use Poe and her murder as my locator to see how efficient it is going to be. Poe, can you tell your murderer to locate me some rabbits? Okay, Daddy. She started to caw and croak. Then almost all of the birds around us started to fly in all directions. After a few minutes, I started to hear some cawing and croaking all around us, but it was coming from a distance. Daddy, they found some. Which way? She came down from the tree branches and landed on top of the big rock right in front of me, and started to caw in different directions. Right, she doesn't know how to count. I must teach them to count as soon as possible. From her frantic pointing of directions, I think they found around 10 rabbits. Take us to the closest one, but tell me before we are closer than, right, closer than that big rock. Okay, I point at a rock bigger than me. It is around 10 meters, 32 feet, away from me. Okay, she took off, and I started following her as fast as possible, but it was hard to follow her in this forest. After a few minutes of running, she lands on a branch and starts cawing at the crow, then turns to me and tells me, Daddy, it is inside the tree hollow right there. Poe tells that crow to bother the rabbit so it will get out of the hollow. I wouldn't be able to order it to bother the rabbit. I can only give the simplest of orders to the dominate animals, like attack, defend or follow, but Poe and Erebus can give more complex orders, maybe because they are birds too or because of another reason I don't know yet. She caws, and the crow flies over to the hollow and starts bothering the rabbit. After some tussling, rabbit decided to get out of the small hollow. I was waiting with bow and arrow at hand, aimed and shot the arrow. The next second there was an arrow at the rabbit's head. In these few years, I became a good archer too. I really love 5x, I don't think I could become a level 2 druid this fast without it. I think it would have taken a talented magic caster 5 to 10 years to reach my level. After that, I followed Poe to 9 more locations and hunted more rabbits. It was starting to be too heavy. I think 10 rabbits are enough to show my talent in hunting and archery to Roderick. He would definitely be informed after I sell those rabbits at Wintertown, and it was starting to be late. I have 3 or 4 hours until the sun is down. So, I decided to spend some time learning how to use my spells, then I would return to Winterfell. I sat down on a rock and took 10 small stones, and called Poe. Poe, do you want to learn to count? What is counting? It is being able to tell how many of something there are. Like there is one Ermer, or there is one Poe, but there are many humans and many ravens. She nodded her head as she understood me. Let's say I have this many stones. How many stones do I have? Can you tell? I show her 3 stones. Yes, you have a stone, 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 that many stones you have. I almost laughed. I took around 7 stones and said, if I have this many stones, are you going to keep saying stone until you call out all of them? She shook her head approvingly. But there is an easier way. It is called numbers. After that, I showed her all the numbers up to 10, but she was only able to learn how to count to 5. For a start, I think it is a good number. Considering I'm teaching a raven how to count. She was really patient and obedient. I don't think I'm going to have that much luck with our loud meathead. For a few hours, I trained how to use a familiar sight spell. For this spell, it was possible to cast without chanting. All I have to do is focus on the connection inside me and follow the tether to the familiar. After that, I could fully control them or share their sight. This training was really hard. I tried to move while sharing pose vision. I would fall after taking 1 or 2 steps, but I have made some progress with this training. A year ago, I couldn't even stand up straight. I even tried R.O.B, air bubble, too. I found a creek inside the forest and used the spell. I can use it outside of water too, but it looks ridiculous. It looks like I have a giant soap bubble on my head, and outside of water, it is really easy to pop it. All you need is to put a finger through it, then it pops. But underwater, it is more durable and elastic. To pop it, you would need a big strike. I am around 6 kilometers away from Winterfell, and Erebus should have reached it hours ago. So, I used Vocadini, summon beast, again. Vocadini, summon beast, Erebus. After he is summoned, I look at my mana, and I lost 18 mana from this summons. It shows my hypothesis was right. With more distance, it is going to take more mana to summon. So, in 20 kilometers, it might take 60 mana to summon them. After that, I spent almost all of my mana on elemental spells training and was only left with 10 mana for emergencies. Then I decided to turn back to Winterfell. The road back was uneventful, and before sundown reached the town after selling my catches. Before I went back to my room, I did an hour of sword training so Roderick wouldn't chew my head off for slacking. Chapter 33. 283 AC. Teaching birds how to count was a bit challenging, but Po learned more quickly. While teaching her, I remembered we teach kids to count their fingers, so I made her count her claws. Now, she can count to 8. It is a good step, but Erebus is the problem, and he still needs to understand the concept of counting. Ah, stupid Ermer, the stone is stone, and claw is claw. Go away, and I don't want this counting thingy. Erebus is the stupid, daddy can count, and I can count, nana nana na, Erebus can't count, Erebus can't count. It started chasing after Po, but she was faster than him, and in the end, he couldn't catch her. I feel like a kindergarten teacher. Po, you shouldn't make fun of Erebus, even though he has muscles as a brain, you still shouldn't make fun of your brother. You are the muscle brain, both of you are the muscle brain. Humph, at least Erebus is not ugly like Ermer. It is just like humans, just as no two people are the same, two familiars are different too, even if they are from the same species. It looks like Po is the brain, and Erebus is the muscle in this duo. I tried a bit more to teach him to count, but for now, I couldn't make progress, so I gave up. POV Roderick. This boy is always making me nervous. Why is he insisting on going out of the castle so much? I don't understand it at all. The outside world is perilous for 9 years old. Yes, nobody in their right mind is going to take a 9-year-old boy seriously when doing banditry, so he will be ignored, or he could even kill them if they underestimate him in a fight. Even though he promised he would run at the sight of danger, I'm still nervous. Should I put some tail on him? My worries don't end even when he is inside the castle too. I thought Wyland would beat him and break some of his arrogance, but he got beaten so truly. Even now, I'm in awe. I hope Mander wouldn't try some idiotic shit just because the boy is a commoner, and it is not helping all the other household guards who are making fun of the Flant boys. Mander is a prideful man. I don't think he can take much of this ridicule. Being a household guard doesn't mean we are petty guards. It means we are in control of at the very least 100 soldiers, and since Mander is the commander of the holdfast right outside of Winterfell, 200 soldiers are under his command. Roderick. Roderick. I'm sorry, my lord, I didn't hear you coming in. I got out of my chair in a hurry and didn't even hear or realize the door had opened. Why are you in such deep thought? I'm sorry, my lord, I was thinking about our little friend and all the things he was doing. What do you mean? Household guards are making fun of Mander a bit too much, my lord. I'm afraid he will do something stupid. Don't worry. I already made it perfectly clear to Malin and him what the boy means to me. I do not understand, my lord. 2 years ago, didn't you only give the boys only a slap on the wrist for their crime? Yes, that is true, but you do not punish a son in front of his father if you don't want the father to hate you all his life, if you can help it, of course. After that, you punish the father privately for their son's crime. This way, they save their face by not being humiliated in front of others, but they will know that they will be punished if they don't control their sons or themselves. I made it perfectly clear to them that it will be black or iron if they get involved in the children's fight. I didn't know that, my lord. Because you didn't need to know that, Roderick, that is why. The only reason you know now is I need you to nudge the other squires against Aylmer a bit. I want them to compete with him. This way, we can use both blades to sharpen each other. If Aylmer gets broken, it means we overestimated him, and if he breaks the other squires, we might be losing around 20 potential knights, but we will be getting one more precious than all of them combined. I don't understand, my lord. Didn't you want Aylmer to have a good relationship with the minor nobles? Yes and no, I want him to have an amicable relationship with them if possible, but it is more critical for the next generation of knights to respect him or, at worst, fear him than having an amicable relationship with him. Fear or respect, both is acceptable to me in the case of Aylmer. But my lord, if the knights respect or fear him that much, wouldn't it threaten Lord R.O.B's authority in the future? It will not, because around 10 or 15 years, there will most definitely be a new bannerman of House Stark, House Drazel. He doesn't want to rule, of course, he wants to be at the top, but not because he is hungry for authority and power. He just wants to be left alone. I have never seen a commoner loves his freedom this much, as long as R.O.B understands it and keeps his childhood relationship with him. I don't think Aylmer would mind being the biggest shield and sword of the north. I hope you are right, my lord. He might have the naivete of childhood right now, but I don't think in the world exists a man that can resist the constant allure of power. Ha 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 ha, you are underestimating the power of House Stark. He might have charisma, power, and some of the knights might stand with him, but the second he stands against House Stark, he will lose all of his support. Northmen live and die honorably, and none of the northern lords will plot against their sworn lord. Actually, Boltons might do it, but I don't think they have the guts for it. Chapter 34. 283 AC. For a week, I have been going to the Wolf's Wood every day, and thanks to that, I earn some pocket change from my catches. I mainly hunt rabbits because they are harder to hit with a bow and arrow. I always shoot after spooking them so they will dart around. It is excellent for training. I'm not doing it to earn money. If I want to, I could use all of my smoke bomb material and make all of them in 1 month, but as a commoner having immense wealth would be nothing but a detriment to my health. The rabbits bring me several groats, copper currency in got and a soph, 2,940 of them make a gold dragon. It would be a waste to hunt and throw them away in a place famous for its starving people in winter times. Besides hunting, I have made some little discoveries about my Quirsambi, Oak's Healed, spell. It is impossible to cast it on an unwilling being. I tried to cast this spell on some of the rabbits I hunted, but it didn't work. At first, I thought it didn't work because the creature was dead, but it didn't work on living ones either. So I tried it on my familiars and worked on both of them. They were encased by a bark-like armor like my arm because they were smaller creatures than me. It affected more than a small part of their body. The armor covered their entire torso, but I wasn't willing to use them as test subjects in an experiment. After that, I thought it only worked on my familiars and me, but when I ordered them not to accept my mana. When I cast, it didn't work this time. Then I understood that the targeted being needs to accept the buff for it to work. Now I knew that I dominated a rabbit, this way, it would accept my buff, and it did. After casting, the armor encased the rabbit's torso and head. I raised my sword and chopped it down with all my might. What was next wasn't a pretty sight to behold. The armor had worked, but I can't say the same thing for the rabbit's legs. Its legs were crushed, but its head and torso were safe. The armor had a big dent. I think the sword cut through half of the armor, but it was still alive. I put it out of its misery and discovered a new thing: the armor disappears when the being dies. I cut it open and looked at its spine and innards, none of them looked damaged. From that, I gathered it protects against blunt force, too. But it didn't protect the legs because they weren't supported by the spell. I have to be careful when I take hits so I won't get crushed. Another thing I discovered was, actually, discovered is not the right word. I have seen a beast that didn't exist on Earth. It is called the icicle snake. It is a native snake to the north, and even though it is a snake, it does not hibernate in winter. It is fully active even in the winter. This snake even changes its color depending on the season. In the summers, like now, its color is light and dark brown, looks like a tree bark, so when it is on a tree, it looks like a branch. In the winter, it is white because of all the snow. It is white in color most of the time because, in the north, almost all the time in winter. It is called icicle because of the way it hunts. It is a poisonous snake, so it is an ambush hunter. It would climb up a tree and hang down from its branches. It will look like an icicle when it is on a tree branch covered with snow. It will wait for prey to pass under the tree, then fall from the tree and bites it. Because of the poison, the prey would die in a minute or so. I almost grabbed one while climbing a tree to have a better vantage point. If Poe didn't warn me, I would have grabbed it and gotten bitten, but thanks to Poe's warning, I saw it and cast Quarsambi, Oaks healed. Before getting bit, if I get bitten most likely have died because there isn't antidote for it. So I decided to bind with one. It could come in handy to have a poisonous animal as a bond. It wasn't hard to catch one after it got stuck in your arm. I put it in a satchel and brought it back to my room. Locked the latch on the door and released the snake from the satchel. For a second, it was disoriented, but it saw me and started to coil. I think it is getting ready to strike. Like most snakes, its movement is slow, but because it is an ambush hunter, its pounce is really fast. Let gone, snare. The snake was squirming in its place, but it could not move. I got close to it and held it from its head and tail. It was still trying to get out of my hand, but I was strong enough to hold it without a problem. I sat down on the ground and started the move my mana to the snake tried to begin the bonding process, but it was fighting back like crazy. Because it is not a baby animal but an adult one, establishing the connection was really hard. It resisted every step of the way. It took around 1 hour. But finally, the connection was established, and it was bounded to me, but it almost took all of my mana to bind with this one snake. I spent around 50 mana. Got better at bounding, but the mana and time spent got up, and I knew I didn't make any mistakes while bounding. I was patient, brave, and unbending, but it still took more mana and time. I think it is because it is an adult animal, not a baby one. So it is easier to bind with a baby. Chapter 35. 283 AC. After the connection was made, I could feel it like how I felt Poe and Erebus before, but rather than a conversation, it is more primal. I think it is because snakes are not as smart as ravens, and I never believed Poe and Erebus could talk before bonding with me. Even before I became a level 2 druid, both of them were so much smarter than other ravens. My hypothesis was ravens are intelligent creatures already. Hence, it is a fact they are able to relay basic info among themselves, so Poe and Erebus couldn't differentiate raven talk from consciously speaking. If my thinking is correct, in time, this snake should be able to learn to speak and get smarter with time, or because of the mana, when I become level 2, the mana inside the training space becomes equal to God's wood level of mana. So I don't have to go there for now. What should we name you? The snake raised its head, came close to my arm, and started coiling on it, then slowly started to slither up my arm to my neck. It basically becomes a necklace around my neck. Are you a male or a female? The thought of the snake started to flow into my mind. It is a male. I will call you Imu. The second I named it, I could feel the mana around the air start to whirl around it and flow inside Imu. I didn't feel like this when I named Poe and Erebus. Me becoming a level 2 druid must be the reason. With that, I become more proficient with controlling and feeling mana, that must be why I can sense it now. So this is how they learn to collect mana. When I name them, it is like opening the floodgates, and then they start collecting it themselves, but what I gathered talking with the ravens, it becomes easier to collect mana when they touch me while I'm replenishing my mana. Like when I bounded with the ravens, I can feel I got a new buff too. Even though my eyes are closed but can see heat, is this what a snake's heat sensors feel like? It isn't like the predator sight in the movie, it is more jumbled. I can tell Erebus and Poe are behind me, and I can feel them as heat sources, but I can't tell their exact shape. It is like a heat mass, but when I turn my head, it becomes more defined, it becomes like I'm looking at a really low-definition screen, and I can tell they are birds. I thought of something and right away connected with Poe, then started looking at my face to see if I had pits on my face like the snakes. That was a relief. I don't have pits like a snake's sensory organs, so it is an entirely magical buff. Moving around with this while my eyes are open is a bit weird. It is going to take some time to adjust to it completely, but I can't wait to hunt while using this, and the good part is it isn't costing me any mana to open or close this sense. After that, I worked on my mana until I spent it all, then went to bed. I slept for 5 hours and woke up to the rising sun. Today I don't want to leave for the Wolf's Wood immediately, I want to train with other squires in the morning training session. So I got ready and went to the keep's kitchen to break my fast and talked with Breeze a bit. She is a really good woman, I would like it if she started a new family. It is such a pity she is all alone in this harsh world. Once in a while, I try to talk with her so she wouldn't feel alone, but after her husband died, she pulled herself into her shell and never interacted with other men. I think it has been 4 years since he died, but it looks like she still misses him. Sometimes I see her looking at a wooden whistle carved like a bird, it was the last thing he gave her before going to war, and he never returned from it. I hope she will find happiness one more time. How are you today, Aunt Breeze? She looked at me lovingly and said. Oh, I'm all right, sweetheart. How is your training going? Are the noble children treating you right? It is not bad, and I don't care what they think or do. As long as they don't stand in my way. I have no problem with them. She looked around nervously, then got up and sat beside me. She spoke with a whispering voice. Sweetheart, you shouldn't talk like that. In a castle, even the walls have ears. Lord Stark might be favoring you right now, but as a commoner, you should never genuinely trust the nobles. To them, we are expendable, don't get me wrong, Lord Stark is one of the most honorable and trustworthy men I have ever seen, but he is still a noble. He wouldn't mind sacrificing you for his greater cause. He might treasure you today, but if you force his hand, tomorrow, he can discard you to keep his peace. She made sense, nobles will sacrifice small folk without a second thought. It is clear from all their wars. Lord Stark is no different on that part. How many levies die in every battle? Is there any song written for that small folks? No, but if one noble dies in a battle or one noble family is massacred, there are epics written about them. I can see her pain in losing her husband in the noble's fight. If you are going to work for a noble, it is best to work for a Stark, but never give them your 100%. Aunt Breeze has a mind as sharp as a steel trap. If she was born in modern Earth time, I bet she could become someone important. After chatting with her a bit more, I got up and headed to the training grounds. When I reached the training grounds, I could only see hostile eyes. Felt like a prey entering a hunting ground. I was matched with a 14-year-old squire, he was full of aggression, and it was like he had a vendetta against me. We started the spar, but I wasn't going to use my buffs because he was only 0.3 stats stronger and faster than my base stats. If I use my buffs, he wouldn't be a challenge. He started charging me immediately, it was a quick but controlled assault. He wasn't moving without a plan. He began to do an overhead slash when I saw that I was getting ready to deflect him to the side, but the second his sword started to slide to my side, he let go of his sword and tried to tackle me. I wasn't expecting this, but he wasn't the first one to try and tackle the 9-year-old to the ground. He was trying to turn this into a grappling match, so I obliged. I, too, let go of my sword, slipped under his left arm, grabbed that arm, turned around, and started a judo throw. I used all of his forward momentum against him and threw him to the ground. Today I was feeling a bit different. If this happened yesterday, it feels like I couldn't act this fast. It is like I have better dynamic vision and better reflexes. What is your problem, man? You are our problem, Mr. Perfect. After him, I fought with 3 more guys around 13 to 15 years old and beat them all, but they were so aggressive against me, like the first guy. To beat the 15-year-old one, I had to sacrifice flesh to take bone. I had to block one of his strikes with my right arm to strike his chest. Moro, it is going to bruise really bad. Chapter 36. I was about to leave the training ground when Wyland blocked my way. I want a rematch. Like the other squires, Wyland looked aggressive too. But at the same time, Wyland felt different than other squires. He was angry for sure, but his anger wasn't like other squires, they were all rearing to go at me. He was different in this aspect. He wanted to spar and beat me, but he didn't feel impatient like the others. I hurt my arm today. Let's do it another day. He looked at my arm and smirked a bit, then said. I don't want you to have an excuse when I beat you, let's do it next week. Heal your arm and fight me with your %100, and I don't care what Sir Roderick says. You are not better than me. What do you mean? What did Sir Roderick say? He looked at me one more time, then turned around and left without explaining. I was going to leave, but I had to learn what was going on. I went to a squire that I was good with, even he was being passive-aggressive with me, but from him, I was able to learn what was going on, so after that, I went to see Sir Roderick. He was with other knights, and they were sparring too. All of them were like monsters to me. There were around 12 of them, and sometimes I would come and watch them spar. I'm able to follow their moves when they are warming up, but when they go at it for real, I wasn't able to follow them, but now it is different. Now I'm able to see them move. My dynamic vision definitely got better. I still wouldn't be able to match their speed. From their movement, I can see they have around 6 to 8 SPD, as for their strength, I can't know for sure because I didn't spar with any one of them before, but I can make an educated guess. I would say they have around 6 to 7 STR. Fully buffed, I would only have 3.9 STR and 4.1 SPD. I came close to the sparring area and said, "Sir Roderick, could I have a word, sir?" He stopped observing the sparring knights, turned to me, and said, "Go on. Could we talk in private, sir?" He turned around and started to walk, then said, "Follow me." When we entered his room, he went to his desk and sat down. "Go ahead, say what you want." "Sir, why are you inciting other squires against me?" While smiling, he said, "When did I ever do that? All I did was raise their training time and intensify it a bit." "Yes, while you were doing those things simultaneously, you were criticizing them about how they are lower than me, and I wouldn't even sweat while doing this little training. Did I lie? Would you sweat while doing the training they are doing? Aren't they lower than you when it comes to talent?" I couldn't say anything to that. For me, the kind of training they were doing lost all of its meaning last year. "Sir, can I talk freely?" "Humph, go ahead. Lord Stark, and you are trying to manipulate the squares to temper me. I'm not a sword that needs tempering. Don't like being handled all the time." His smiling face gets more serious. "I thought you were more mature than this, but it looks like you still couldn't get over your naivete, or your talent got to your head, boy. Just because the Lord gives you some slack because of your talent doesn't make you above others, and just like everyone else, you are under the orders of Lord Stark. He will temper you like steel if he wants to temper you like steel. You don't even understand how high his expectations of you is. Now go and do whatever you want. This is a right given to you by Lord Stark, and you can use your free time however you want, but never come to me to whine about your feelings and stop acting like a brat. He wants you to be a leader for the future knights, so act like one." Now that I got an earful, it makes a bit of sense. If I were the Lord, I would have done something similar too, and I would have to lose this democratic thinking I have in my mind. I'm not free to do what I want, and other people can take what is mine or even take my freedom from me without any reason. Of course, I can always run away and become an outlaw if they push me too hard. I think that is why Lord Stark gives me this much freedom. Now I think about it. He doesn't want me to run and wants me to stay in the north. I was short-sighted, please forgive me, sir. I didn't know your plans for my future were this extensive. I should keep my head down and do what they want, but if they think I'm some sword they can wield however they want, they are gravely mistaken. I guess Aunt Breeze is correct, and you should never give 100% to the nobles." I left his room and went to my room to get ready to go to Wolfswood, but first, I had to apply some ointment to my bruising arm. I have created an anti-bruising salve made from herbs. The main ingredients are arnica flower and old god's blood. As the name states, the second one is a native to this world. It is a blood-red flower with big petals that only grows near weirwood trees. From what I gathered from the books, this was the herb they used to make their bruise salve, but if I add arnica to it, it becomes an orange salve, and the effect is, at the very least, tripled. Salve made out of only old god's blood can heal a big bruise in a week, but this one can heal in 2 days. The injury on my arm was worse than I thought. The pain had increased like a succession of waves crashing on the shore. The color had turned a dark purple in the middle and red around the injury. I began to wonder if the source of this pain was a hairline fracture. It really sucks that I don't have any healing spells yet. If I had a healing spell, I wouldn't have to deal with herbs, everything would be much easier. At least I have extensive knowledge about the effects of herbs, or else I had to depend on Maester Lewin. Let's find a solution for the bruising and pain for today. If the pain doesn't subside by tomorrow, it means I have a fracture in my arm. For bruising, my orange ointment will do the trick. I'll need a medicine made of white willow bark, boswellia, ginger, and honey for intense pains. It was really hard to find boswellia, which only grows in the southern parts of Essos. I shouldn't be using this arm today, just in case. But I want to go to Wolfswood too, what should I do? Just to be safe, I could stay at the castle today, hang out with the Stark kids, and rest. After some searching, I finally found the Stark boys by the kennels. All of them were there, even Bran had come. Time flies so quickly. I feel like he was born yesterday, and today he was a 2-year-old boy climbing the kennel fence and hanging down like a monkey. Rob and John were trying to teach the dogs new tricks with the help of the kennel master, and I can't say they were very successful. The dogs were not listening to Rob and John. They were running around and jumping on each other. On the other hand, Sansa was sitting on the sidelines, ladylike, as usual, watching them and lecturing Arya about how she should act. As always, little Arya did what she wanted without caring what Sansa was saying. Arya was getting to be a real troublemaker, but I could never get mad at the rascal, and now she was trying to ride one of the big dogs like a horse. When she saw me, she started waving and shouting. "Ermer, come here quickly. Look, I've become a dog rider." Her eyes were shining with happiness, but on the other side of the kennel fence, Sansa had a furious face. "Arya Stark, get off that dog right now, or I'll tell Mother about this." When their mother's name was uttered, this time Arya's laughing face changed shape. I was just about to say something when Rob called me. "Ermer, come and look, we managed to teach this dog how to give a paw." After seeing the dog give his paw, both of them were looking at me with eyes begging for appreciation. So I obliged and said, "Wow, it must have been really hard to teach a dog to do this." I could see they were feeling proud of this accomplishment, and Rob proudly said, "I bet you couldn't teach the dogs that as quickly as we did." He is asking for it, so I'm going to oblige. I went to the kennel master and said, "Can you give me some dog treats?" He reached into the bag at his waist and handed me a few pieces of what looked like some kind of dried meat. I went to the dog that they had just tried to train but had failed to do, and I crouched in front of the dog and started petting it. As soon as I touched him, he started to shake and whimper because I was beginning to dominate him. I started acting like I was training him because it would seem suspicious if I gave him orders, and he started following them immediately. I was pushing the dog with my hand so it would roll and, at the same time, was giving verbal commands. "Come on, roll over, yes like that, roll over, good boy." I was petting him and giving him dog treats every time he finished a roll. After that, I made the swoosh sound while pretending to shoot him with a bow and arrow, then I said, "Play dead," as I pushed him to lie still on the floor. At this moment, Rob, John, and the kennel master were watching me with open mouths. When I returned next to them, they were still flabbergasted. Then I said, "So I taught the other two tricks that I thought were easier because I knew it was so difficult to teach a dog to give paw." When I said that, Rob looked at me while squinting his eyes, then he jumped on top of me. While he was on top of me, he held my shoulders and started to shake me, then started shouting, "Why are you so good at everything you do? I hate you." I lost my footing, and we fell to the ground. I thought he was going to cry because we fell, but he started to laugh, then I started laughing too. At that moment, I felt an aggression swell inside my mind. In a second, I realized what it was and shouted, "No! I am you, stop!" Chapter 38. Imu almost bit Rob, and if I had told him to stop even a second later or hadn't listened to me, Rob would probably have died. It reached out from my shirt's neck and paused about 3 to 4 centimeters, 1 inch, away from Rob's arm. I hastily grabbed it and tucked it back into my shirt, but it was too late, Rob had already seen it. His eyes widened with horror, and he shouted with all his might, "Icicle snake!" Everyone's attention was suddenly on us. Even the people away from our group started to gather or look this way. "Calm down, Rob, Imu won't hurt anyone unless he is provoked." "Who the hell is Imu?" "It is the name of my icicle snake." "Do you have a death wish? Why are you rearing such a dangerous animal and keeping this poisonous thing in your shirt? You definitely have a death wish." "Don't worry. He is perfectly tame, as long as I treat him well, he will be loyal to me. You should not keep temperamental and aggressive animals such as poisonous snakes as pets, they are unpredictable animals." When Rob said this, the kennel master came right next to us and said, "Young Lord is right, you should not raise poisonous animals, even if you are going to raise them, you have to use safe containers so they can't get out. Imu, you caused such a big scene. I know he didn't mean this to happen, he was just trying to protect me. He must have thought R.O.B was attacking me. Please, let me prove it, Imu is not that kind of animal. Having said that, I reached my hand towards the collar of my shirt and told Imu to get out of my shirt. He slowly crawled out of it and coiled around my hand to my arm. Everyone's eyes started to bulge, and some of them gasped at the sight of him. You need to understand a good bite from him means almost certain death in the north. Imu, now get on top of my head and wait there. After that, he started to crawl from my hand to my shoulder, then coiled around my head, and lastly, managed to get on top of my head. Horror was on everyone's faces except Bran and Arya, the only thing on those two's faces was genuine wonder and awe. After getting used to the animal but still keeping his distance, R.O.B asked. How are you doing that? I'm not doing anything, I just trained him to answer some commands and taught him some tricks. Of course, it is a lie, but I don't want others to know what I am. Just then, Roderick broke through the crowd and came over to us. What is happening here? After people told him what was happening, he realized there was an icicle snake on top of my head, then he jumped back with fright while shouting. For the sake of old gods, are you trying to give people heart attacks? From a distance, he started observing the snake, then said, Boy, do you ever dream of being an animal like a raven or a snake in your sleep? Who, our Roderick has a sharp mind, contrary to his look. No, sir, I never had a dream like that. Well, have you ever had an animal do what you say right away? Of course not, they are unruly and aggressive before I train them. After the training, they start to listen to me. Even then, it is for simple tricks and orders. I could see in Roderick's eyes that he didn't quite believe me, but he didn't push the issue any further. But that moment Kennel Master asked, how is it possible to tame a snake? How did you do that? It was tough, it took me 3 years to raise and train him from an egg to an adult snake. Of course, I cannot tell you how I did this knowledge might come in handy in the future. When I said this, the Kennel Master's face fell, but he couldn't say anything because Roderick was next to us, so he remained silent. Meanwhile, Arya and Bran slowly slid towards me, and I caught her hand as she tried to climb up the fence and reach for my head. Arya, never try to touch a snake. Imu may be a tamed snake and will not show aggression towards me and only me, but he will definitely bite other people if they try to touch him. Do you understand me? Never try to touch a snake. R.O.B pulled Arya aside by her arm and started scolding her about what she tried to do. POV Ned Stark. I was busy doing my daily inspection, and as I was walking through the courtyard, I heard a commotion by the kennels. I was starting to walk there when I saw Roderick approaching me. My lord, if you have time, I have something to discuss with you privately. Can't we talk while I do my inspection? Is it that important? I think it is, my lord. Okay, then let's go to my solar. After we entered my solar, Roderick closed the door and explained what had happened. As I listened, my eyes kept widening with surprise. How a snake could be tamed so much? It cannot, that's why I can't believe what he is saying, my lord. I think the boy is a warg. Please don't talk like old Nan, Roderick. My lord, I saw them. What did you see? Wargs, my lord, before I became commander of Winterfell when I was a young knight, I always wanted to see the wall, and one time I even ranged with the Night's Watch, and wildlings ambushed us. We successfully thwarted the ambush, but I cornered one of the wildlings while he was trying to escape. The man's eyes turned completely white, and a wolf jumped on me through the bushes. After a bit of a struggle, I managed to thrust my knife into the wolf's stomach, but at the same time, this wildling grabbed his stomach and started screaming. I was just about to finish the job when his eyes turned white again, and this time a hawk started attacking me, and that hawk inflicted this wound on my cheek. Why did you never tell me about this story before? Because, in all honesty, I'm afraid, my lord. What do you mean, what are you afraid of? I'm afraid of what is real and what is a story, my lord. I don't want to ask myself if wargs are real, what else is real too? Chapter 39. After Roderick left, the other people gradually lost their fear and curiosity toward Imu, returning to their businesses. R.O.B's scolding must have worn off. Arya and Bran were starting to be hyperactive again. After I put Imu in my shirt, Stark kids, and I continued to play with the dogs, but a puppy caught my eye. This pup looked very skinny and sickly. Realizing that I was looking at the pup, Arya also came next to me and looked at it. Ermer, what is wrong with this puppy? I don't know, Arya, it looks sick. While I was talking with Arya, the kennel master came over to us. This runt of the litter was born ill, and his mother abandoned it to raise the healthy ones, and we expect him to die soon. Arya's eyes started to water suddenly, and she spoke in a slightly tearful voice. Ermer, we have to save it, it looks really pitiful. Please, let's help it. I don't know if it can even be saved. Why? Didn't you always say that you knew medicine and herbs very well? Please use your knowledge and save it. Okay, I will try to cure it, but I promise nothing, it is very sick and might even die on the morrow. After saying goodbye to the others, I set off with the puppy to my room. I don't think there is a way to cure this pup with herbs, at least, the herbs I have on hand won't work. If I had more potent herbs, maybe it would work. The other method is magic, but I don't have any magic that can heal right now. I can think of another method related to magic, but I have never tested this method. This method came to my mind when I named Imu and saw mana enter his body. After I name my familiars, they are able to collect mana. I wonder if normal animals can collect mana in their bodies without being my familiar? Po, Erebus, come to my room, I need to talk to you. After a few minutes, they entered the room through my window. I collect some mana on my hand and ask. You guys know what this is, right? Yes, Daddy, it is. Mana wind. Did you forget what it is called, stupid Ermer? It is not called mana wind, you stupid bird. It is mana, ma-na. You are stupid, all of your family is stupid. You don't even know mana wind is called mana wind. There is no way to have a decent conversation with this muscle brain, let's just ignore him. I took a deep breath and continued. How do you collect mana? Can you tell me? Mana wind. Erebus, if you open your big beak again, I will pluck all of your feathers. I knew it. You are jealous of my beautiful feathers, you can't have them. They are mine, stupid Emir, ugly featherless Emir. You will never be as handsome as me. My face started to twitch really hard, I felt like a volcano ready to erupt. I used full body Letagon, snare, to paralyze him. He looked like a statue on the table. Peace at last. I turned back to Po, and we continued. As Daddy said, mana goes to the heart when training. What? That can be true. Does she mean what I think it means? No, that can't be true. Po, come here. I raised my arm so she could perch on it. When she landed on my arm, I placed my hand on her chest and tried to feel her mana. I was shocked, she really has mana in her heart, which is tiny, but there is mana in there. She is basically creating a mana heart. Is it the same with Erebus? The spell was losing its effect, and he was beginning to thaw. Erebus, how are you collecting it? Collecting what? Vein bulging on forehead. I'm asking, how are you collecting corn? Stupid Ermer, why would I collect corn? I don't even like corn. Be patient Ermer, be patient. It might be a bit smart, but it is still a bird. My magnificently smart Erebus, what were we talking about? We were talking about mana wind, then stupid Ermer started talking about corn. That is it. I'm going to pluck every feather you have. You stupid raven, if you know what we are talking about, then why aren't you telling me how you are collecting mana? Better yet, come here, I will look myself. I won't come. Do you think I'm stupid like you? You just said you would pluck my beautiful feathers. Ugly Ermer, you are just jealous, aren't you? Deep breaths, deep breaths. Don't get sucked into his tornado of stupidity. Sometimes I'm thinking he is more intelligent than Poe, but he is acting like this because he enjoys torturing me and raising my blood pressure. Come here, don't worry, I won't hurt you, I just want to smother you with love. I finally convinced him to come to me, and when I checked his mana, I noticed that he wasn't collecting it in one spot. His mana was spread all over his body, meaning that his mana covered every part of his body, including his muscles, bones, blood, and skin, but what he was doing was close to what I was thinking of doing to the dog. I need to nourish its whole body, I don't think it will work if I nourish a part of it. The question is whether this will work because mana will enter its body unwillingly with my control, unlike my familiars. I held the puppy in my arms while stroking its head and talking to it. If this method doesn't work, you will be dead in a few days anyway, please forgive me for what is about to happen, but it's the only way to save you. I opened his jaw and put a rolled cloth inside so it wouldn't clench its teeth so hard and break them. I slowly collected the mana in the environment and started circling it around me. This way, once I start using mana, I don't have to focus too much on moving it. Chapter 40. I was just about to start using mana when I realized this poor guy didn't even have a name. He might die as a result of this experiment, and I'm also curious if naming an animal that is not my familiar will have any effect. So I decided to give this little guy a name. I lifted him to the air with both hands, then turned his face towards me and began to study him. He was emaciated and did not even have the strength to open his eyes. Many cultures on Earth believed that names had power, so people tried to give strong names to people and things they loved or gave names that meant the traits they wanted them to have. So I'm going to do the same with you. Let's see, from now on, your name is Barris. As soon as I gave its name, the mana around the pup started to fluctuate, but it didn't go inside its body like it did with Imu. Mana's movement was like water with a stone thrown into it. Mana was advancing wave after wave but stopped after a few seconds. This experiment brought me more questions than answers because was mana activated because of me, or did it happen the same for everyone? Another question is, will it make any difference to name an entity without care? 1001 questions were running through my mind but now was neither the time nor the place to think about them. Pup's condition was more critical. I took him back into my arms and caressed his neck. I gathered all my focus and started pushing mana into his body as slowly as possible, but as soon as mana made contact, I felt his entire body contract. I couldn't stop now. I knew it would cause him incredible pain, but it had to be done. Mana first entered my body, and when I slowed down and took control of it, I pushed it to his body with the help of my hands. He started shaking uncontrollably and was screaming, but his screams turned into muffled whimpers. After a few minutes of pushing mana into his body, I noticed something. Mana was entering his body, but his body was not absorbing the mana. It looked like his body was rejecting it. I couldn't let it continue like this. If this continued and I fed more mana, his body would collapse sometime later. What else could I do? At that moment, I remembered the Kelagon Nagrosa, stop bleeding, spell, not precisely a healing spell. It cauterizes the wound rather than healing it, but it must have some similarities with healing spells at its core. When I use this spell, the mana that enters the body will gain some properties of the fire element, but it is not precisely fire. If a fire spell infiltrates into the body, it tries to burn everything in front of it until all its energy and momentum is gone, but instead of burning everything, this spell hangs on the surface and creates a membrane here. So what I need is an intent like in the membrane creation part for this spell, but instead of forming a membrane, it needs to nourish and strengthen the body. Let's try it. I gave my full attention to the mana that was going to come out of my hand and started repeating my intentions, and this time I had to use my own mana and not the surrounding mana because I couldn't cast spells with the surrounding mana. Nourish and strengthen the body, nourish and strengthen the body, nourish and strengthen the body, nar, and strengthen the body. Medish, and strengthen the body, med and strengthen. The spell was almost at the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't reach it. My mana was flowing like water, and the pup's body couldn't take this anymore. I kept pushing myself. It was as if I had forcibly pulled a curtain in my mind. It suddenly appeared, clear as a mirror. I collected all my remaining mana and vocalized with all my being. Medanta. Nourish and strengthen the body. My hands began to glow with a greenish light, and a warm feeling began to envelop us. Barris's whimpering ceased, and he began to breathe easily. I sighed deeply, and at that moment, I felt a warm discharge in my nose and ears. I brought one hand to my nose, and the other to my ear and looked at what was going on. Oh fuck's sake! Blood! Blood was coming from my nose and ears, and suddenly a great weakness came over me. Then, I passed out. Something wet was constantly touching my forehead. It was quite an uncomfortable feeling. I wish I could sleep a little more, but suddenly I came to my senses and jumped out of my place. I almost died trying to heal a goddamn dog. I will never try to create a new spell ever again. From now on, I will just practice and try to comprehend mana. I was too arrogant, too reckless. This made me realize arcane arts are not a toy, it is a fucking bomb. But simultaneously, I can't help but be proud of myself. I managed to create a healing spell. Authenticate Medenvita. Medenvita, it will boost the body's healing capacity to its limit but can't heal instantly. It can close minor flesh wounds or boost the body's immunity system in time. Level 3 spell, costs 60 mana. So that's why I almost died when I was just level 2, created a level 3 spell, and cast this spell. Daddy, are you okay now? Yes, Po, I'm fine now. How long was I out? I have a big headache, but other than that, everything looks fine. Daddy fell asleep yesterday noon and woke up this noon. Did I sleep for a whole day? I think it is a small price to pay for what happened. I started looking around and saw Barris. He was still sleeping where I had left him before I passed out, and I had a small wet rag right next to me. What is this, Po? I showed her the small wet rag. When other people passed out like Daddy, I saw that a cloth was put on their foreheads, so I brought a cloth so that it would wake Daddy up. I couldn't help but smile and started scratching under her beak. Chapter 41. It's been 2 days since I tried to heal the pup, but I'm still paying the price for my arrogance. It seems like I haven't suffered any permanent damage physically. At first, I couldn't even raise my arm on the first day, but I can now walk again after 2 days. The bad news is even after 2 days of rest and meditation, I still cannot accumulate mana at the normal speed. So usually, I could refill my mana in 5 to 6 hours, but now, even though 2 days have passed, I could only collect as little as 25 mana. There is definitely a tiny improvement in my mana accumulation because I was only able to accumulate 10 mana on the first day, but on the second day, I was able to accumulate 15 mana. I should not push my luck like this again. From now on, when I do experiments, I should think 1,000 times and then act. Barris seems to be getting better every day. He can now open his eyes, and today when I brought him food and water, he had the strength to get up and eat it. If we count the time I passed out after casting the spell, it's been 3 days for him, and it's normal for him to start recovering. I don't think he's out of danger yet. His body is beginning to get stronger, but I should cast a healing spell on him once more for him to fully recover. This healing spell is not really powerful enough to cure diseases. Barris is still shaking and has a palpably higher body temperature than other pups. Which means his body is still fighting something. In the description of the spell, it clearly said that this was a spell that nourishes the body and strengthens the immune system. So he is most likely going to need a second booster shot. 3 days later. It's been almost a week, and I've fully recovered physically. When I woke up this morning, I realized that my mana was full, but with a difference. My mana capacity was increased by 10, and now my max mana is 75. When I realized that I was recovering, I did physical training for 1 to 2 hours to relieve the rawness of my body. I then went to the sparring area and was met with even more angry looks than before. Roderick must not have been idle all this time and praised me while slapping the squires with more hellish training. I could almost feel the punches they were throwing at me. After some thought, I decided not to spar today. In 2 days, I had a spar with Wyland. During this time, I didn't want another injury. So I decided to do fitness training instead of more strenuous physical activities, and today I also needed to put a healing spell on Barris. After 1 to 2 more hours of training, I went back to my room. I was exhausted and was going to rest for 4 to 5 hours after casting the spell, and if my mana collection had gone back to normal, my mana should have been full when I woke up. When I went to Barris, he opened his eyes and looked at me, but he seemed to want to go back to sleep right after. In the last 6 days, the energy and activity of Barris's body seemed to be decreasing, but the color of the short hairs that covered his body seemed to have revived, and his fever was decreasing. I slowly reached towards him and placed my hand lightly on his chest. Medenvita, nourish and strengthen the body. My hand glowed greenish like the previous time, and a warm feeling enveloped me, but unlike the last time, I did not feel a great weakness right after. The only thing I can count as a side effect was my mana flowing like water. This spell cost me exactly 60 mana. I found this healing spell much easier to understand than fire element spells, perhaps because healing is better suited to a druid than burning. I think so because I could bring ball spells to level 2 in almost all elements, but I could not make any progress in the fireball. It would not be right to call the level 2 ones a ball spell now. Earth and ice spells are now shard spells. Especially earth magic was very deadly, as I expected. Ice magic was not bad either. They both have a good point and a bad point. Ice may be more fragile, but it is cheaper than earth shard magic as it is worth 10 mana, while earth shard spell is much more durable but more expensive at 15 mana. I don't have to think about adding a spin anymore. As soon as I cast both spells get a spin. The situation is somewhat similar in the lightning and wind elements. I can use both at a distance now, but the effect is decreasing so much that they turn into a complete waste of mana, so I decided to turn both into melee touch spells. Maybe because I don't spend mana to direct both of them away, or because of their close range, these spells are much cheaper than the others, both cost 5 mana. Last but not the least, I turned my water ball spell into a water jet. Of course, it's not strong enough to cut metal and will have difficulty penetrating even quality leather armor, but I think it shows promise. After creating a water ball, developing this spell was the easiest. I surrounded and pressured it with all my mana power. When it can't be compressed anymore, I create a small opening in the coating of the spell in the direction I want to send, and with this pressure, water comes out and almost cuts like a knife. When I used this spell on a big tree, it couldn't cut it, but it shattered its bark and made a big gash in the tree. I can say that the biggest reason for my arrogance, which was the source of my attempt at healing magic, was that I was able to develop these spells 2 weeks ago. Yawn. All that training took its toll on me. Now, I want to sleep. Let's see if my mana will be full tomorrow. Chapter 42. I woke up in the morning feeling fresh and completely healed, with no trace of mana deprivation left. My mana was completely full, and my body was full of energy. Heavy sigh. How good it is to have a healthy body again. I got out of bed and checked Barris, and I could tell that there was a mountain of difference between how he was a week ago and now. The hairs on his fur were no longer frayed and shedding, it had almost regained its color and shape. He was still skin and bones, but his appetite was good. I don't know what virus or bacteria his body is fighting, but I hope it's something his immune system can beat. It seemed enough to cast a healing spell once a week. When I cast this spell for the second time, now I could sense the mana trace in the body and see that it is still showing its effect. At the moment, other than guesses, I have no idea why this is happening, but almost dying boosted both my mana and body. I currently have 75 mana, 3.4 STR, and 3.6 SPD stats. With buffs, I could increase my stats to 4.2 STR and 4.4 SPD. If I were to put forward a hypothesis, when I was still a level 2 druid, and I tried to cast a level 3 spell, much more mana than I could control entered my body and almost caused my death, but since I didn't die but lived, this excess mana caused my body and my mana heart to grow. I know very well that this time I was just lucky. This method cannot be used for training because you flip a coin between life and death each time. If I try to use this for training, the probability of death is many times greater than life. My match with Wyland had come, and I could beat him again because I'm physically much stronger than the last time, but I had a bit of doubt about Wyland's physical stats. In our previous fight, 3.5 STR and 3.3 SPD were the highest stats he used, but authenticate is not something to be trusted 100%. I think he had little opportunity to really use all his strength in the previous fight. Yes, he didn't underestimate me while fighting, but that doesn't mean he used all his strength, so I shouldn't act with overconfidence. So, I decided to take my sword, dagger, and throwing knives with me. I had just put everything to my belt and was heading towards the door when familiar voices started coming from the hallway. All the Stark kids were in front of me when I opened the door, and Rob raised his hand and gave a greeting. Hello there. Arya and Bran were very curious about the puppy, so we thought we'd come for a visit. They've been so curious for a few days now. Arya pushed Rob aside, stepped right in front of me, and asked with great curiosity and uneasiness. Aemir, how's the puppy? He's better now, isn't he? Nothing's going to happen to him now, right? Wow, slow down, Arya, you've asked 1,001 questions in 1 second, calm down a bit. I patted her shoulders to calm her down and continued. Let's answer all of your questions one by one. The puppy's condition is much better than a week ago. I can say he's starting to get better, but he's still sick, and we don't know if he can beat this disease. Only time will tell, but I'm doing my best. Arya and Bran were happy when they heard that the puppy was getting better, but learning about the possibility of him still getting sick made them a little nervous and unhappy. When I saw that they were upset, I immediately continued my speech. He's much better now, and he even got up and walked around today. Would you like to come in and play with the puppy? But you shouldn't force him if he doesn't want to move. If he doesn't want to play, it means he's tired and needs all the rest he can get. You know that, right? They began to shake their heads excitedly, and soon after, they burst into the room. I had a small room that became a bit cramped when 6 people entered, even though we were children. Sansa was sitting in the chair by the table, watching the puppy with all her attention. Rob, John, and I were sitting on my bed watching Arya and Bran play with the pup on the floor. Rob turned to me and looked at the sword hanging from my belt. Were you going to go to practice? Something like that. I promised to have a match with one of the squires today. John asked, "Do we know the person you are going to fight?" "You've probably heard of him, even if you don't know him. I am going to fight with Mander Flant's eldest son, Wyland Flant." In an instant, their eyes opened wide, and John began to speak with great excitement and a little nervousness. "Isn't he like 15 or something? Why are you fighting someone so big?" "Actually, he is 14 name days old, and I have already fought him before and even beat him. This will be a rematch for him." They both stood up excitedly, and Rob said, "Are you sure you are 9 name days old? What kind of 9 name days old can beat a 14 name days old teenager? You don't even look like you're 9 name days old anyway." He was right about that. The average height of 9 name days old boys in the north was 1.3 m, 4.2 feet, while I was 1.5 m, 4.9 feet, tall. He and John were 10 name days old and 1.45 m, 4.76 feet, tall, and although they were a name days older than me, they were 5 centimeters shorter. "Let's go and watch it, it could be an exciting match," said Arya. I had no idea when she came next to us and how long she had been listening to us, but she insisted to Rob that they had to go and watch the fight, and Rob could not resist and agreed. Chapter 43. We had left my room and were starting to make our way down the hall, but I noticed Sansa was beginning to fall behind, and it was clear from her face that she was hesitating about whether to come with us or not. "What's wrong, Sansa? Is there a problem?" "I don't think I should come with you." "Why is that?" "A lady has no business in a place like the sparring arena." This was Septa Mordain and Lady Catelyn talking. "Why do you think so?" Septa Mordain said that places like these were not fit for a lady, but wild and barbaric women would go to such places. I sighed deeply. It was just as I thought. I heard other knights were talking in the sparring area. There was a lady named Maege Mormont in the House Mormont, and she was one of the greatest warriors in the north. Many have tasted defeat and death under her war hammer. "Do you think Lady Maege Mormont is a savage and a barbarian?" "I don't know, but Septa said we shouldn't go against the teachings of the Seven and don't act like tree-worshipping wildling barbarians." "Sansa, do we live in the south? Do you think Lord Stark, your siblings, and I are tree-worshipping barbarians?" "Lady Catelyn may worship the Seven, but remember that you are a northern lady, and your father is the paramount of the north." "Yes, women in the north may not be knighted, but that doesn't mean they can't be warriors. Only one person in the north can tell you what you can and cannot do, and that person is your father and certainly not Septa Mordain. If you want to come with us today, I want you to forget what Septa said and listen to your heart, and when you see your father, I want you to tell him what Septa said about the old gods to the letters." After our talk she decided to come with us. When I heard her, I smiled. There is still hope for her. As today's fight would be with blunted steel swords, we were fully armored as usual. I was used to the weight of the armor by now. It used to slow me down a lot and hinder my movement, but fighting with armor for a year got me completely used to it. We were both in the arena and watching each other closely, but today's Wyland was different. He wasn't displaying his usual cocky behavior. He didn't even open his mouth when we came face to face. I raised my sword higher than usual and gave an opening in my lower body, but Wyland did not come to this bait. That's why I made the first attack, pretending to make a vertical cut with my sword in its high position, and at the last moment, I curved my cut to the left, attacking the left side of his body instead of attacking his head. But this attack failed. He suddenly positioned his sword well and stopped me, but without hesitation, I drew my sword back and tried to stab him in the chest. He moved faster than I thought, slid past my sword into my defense, and head-butted me. I was suddenly shocked, my nose hurt so much, and I lost my balance and stumbled backward. At that moment, he raised his sword and made a diagonal cut on my right side. I still couldn't keep my balance, but I saw the attack, rolled to the left, and opened the distance between us. I guessed that, but it was me who didn't take this fight seriously. He really didn't use his full strength last time. His current display of strength is 4.5, and his speed is 4.3, and I started the fight without buffing myself like an idiot. Valhen Grives, aspect of bear, Valhen Kelly, aspect of cat. The buffs took effect instantly, and I felt that my body was filled with power, but even though I got the buffs, I was still a little weaker than him but was a little faster. I had 4.2 STR and 4.4 SPD. I stopped underestimating him and gave my full attention to the fight. I took a quick step forward and pretended to attack from the left diagonal, but at the last moment, I swung my sword over my head and attacked from the right diagonal. When Wyland realized he wouldn't be able to get his sword in time, he chose to take a step back instead of blocking it, and my sword made a nasty noise scratching the steel armor on him. From his left shoulder to his chest there was a big scratch mark and a bit of a dent. He was also aware that he couldn't retreat in time, but that's why the armor was being worn. He knew that nothing would happen to him and that his armor would protect him. This time he launched the attack and dashed forward, but since I was faster than him, I stepped back and positioned my sword right in his path. If he didn't stop, he would ram into my sword. This was the move he had been waiting for, and he quickly drew his sword back and slammed it aside, touching my sword. He acted as if he was breaking through my defense again, trying to force me to take a step back, but I was no longer underestimating him and was able to predict his moves a little bit. He wouldn't have drawn his sword back if he wanted to get inside my defense and grapple. The fact that he drew back his sword meant that he was preparing for another attack, and from that position, he could only attack my legs. If I took a step back, my left leg would pivot and be defenseless. I pretended to fall into his trap and pretended to throw my right foot back, but as soon as he started to move his sword, I jumped backward with my left leg but at the same time swung the sword with my left hand at his head with all my might. There was not much power behind my swing as I jumped backward, but since it is an attack that will hit the head, it will do significant damage, even if it is an attack that only uses my arm strength. By the time Wyland realized that his trap wasn't working, it was too late. He was going to take the blow to the head or sacrifice his arm. Of course, he chose to offer his arm. Just as my sword was about to hit his head, he thrust his arm in, absorbing all the force of the blow. But he would not return empty-handed from this exchange, as he was using his right hand to defend against this blow. At the same time, he took his sword to his left hand and tried to strike my right side, but I was expecting this. I drew the dagger from my waist and used it as a shield against his attack. This dagger was something I had custom made, one with a sharp edge and one with a blunt edge. The dagger had a thin blade and a U-shaped guard. Thanks to this guard, by twisting my wrist a bit, I would be able to seize the opponent's sword between the blade and the guard. That is why it would be of great use in defense, but I could not use this dagger all the time because using the dagger means holding my sword with one hand, which means a significant loss of power when attacking. My attack may not have been entirely successful, but from the state of his right hand, it was clear he couldn't use it in this fight, and his sword was now in my control too. I quickly slid the dagger I was holding in the ice pick grip along his sword before he could fully understand what was going on, and at the same time, releasing my sword grip a little, I flipped my sword upside down and struck a hard blow right on his face with the pommel. I didn't want to damage Wyland permanently, so I hit him on the right side of his helmet. He began to stagger badly from this blow to the head and fell to his knees. The blow may have caused a mild concussion, and I put my sword to his neck. This fight is over. There was a momentary deathly silence as I finished speaking, and then Arya and Bran started cheering. After their loud voices pierced the silence, everyone started talking among themselves and arguing about the fight. I extended my hand to Wyland, and he glared at me a little, but after a heavy sigh, he took my hand. Then I pulled him up and helped him stand up. The fact that he took my hand in front of everyone at that moment had two meanings. The first was that he had acknowledged my superiority, and the second was that there was no longer bad blood between us, and there was peace. Of course, that doesn't mean I could trust him fully, but as far as I knew, Wyland was a simple fellow or an Oscar-worthy actor, but what I sensed from this fight was that Wyland didn't care about anything but the sword. Thanks to my X5 skill, my understanding of the sword were getting deeper every day. It would not be a lie if I said that I had almost 15 years of experience thanks to this skill. This fight made me understand Wyland much more deeply. Every blow, every block, and every step were, in my eyes, thousands of hours spent training. Chapter 44. 283 AC. POV Wyland. I can't believe I lost to a 9-days-old boy even though I fought with all my might. Yes, I was defeated in our first fight as well, but at that time, no matter how much I didn't want to underestimate him and tried to fight him seriously, but I didn't use all my strength from the get-go. I think I used around 70% of my strength, so I was angrier with myself than against him. But this fight was different. I used all my strength in this fight and tried all the tricks I knew. I think I fought wisely too, but it did not lead me to victory. I was beaten in every sense of the word, and he crushed me. He was in control of the whole fight. Every time I tried to get into the rhythm, there came an attack that I couldn't understand where it was coming from. What kind of beast this boy is, I have no idea, but I know one thing: no one other than adult knights can be his rival. He's not much faster than me, and he's even a little weaker physically, but I couldn't hold him in any way. I couldn't use my physical superiority as if I were fighting a creature made of water. For old God's sake, I wouldn't have believed it if Sir Roderick didn't say it, but he doesn't even look 9 name days old. How can that be? If he is 1.50 meters when he is only 9 name days old, I don't even want to imagine how he would look like when he grows up. I don't want to be his enemy anymore, but I will never fall at his feet, either. I must continue to follow my sword, wherever this road takes me, I will never regret it. I can take from this that Aylmer will not be an ordinary knight, and something tells me he may be much more than a footnote at the bottom of the Winterfell knight history books. POVMC. Ah ha ha ha, you see, John, I told you, didn't I? I told you that Aylmer would win this fight by crushing him. Arya was tugging at John's arm excitedly while shouting. John, while trying to hide his embarrassment, said. Yes, I knew that too. No, you did not. You said that Aylmer could win this fight with great difficulty and with the help of luck. Robb got into the middle of them and said, Arya stops fighting with John. Humph, when Robb said that, Arya angrily turned around and began to leave the sparring area. Sansa was going after Arya and expostulating her about how she shouldn't act like this. After another 10 to 15 minutes of talking with Robb and John about the fight, Roderick approached us and said he needed to talk with me. We both left and went to his quarter. While smiling slyly, he said. Today, I'm not going to rant and get straight to the point. With this fight, you have clearly shown that you no longer need to fight against squires. From now on, I will match you with young knights. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX island, which was pretty mundane overall. The only thing that stood out was my fights with adult knights between the ages of 16 and 20, and I couldn't win even one of those fights. They were all far superior to me physically, but most of them were inferior in talent, and they were aware of it. Fighting most of them, I could read them like a book what they would do and when they would do it, but even if I could see the future, it wouldn't mean anything unless my body could follow this information. They were so much faster than me that my body couldn't even if my eyes could follow them. Even the weakest had 6.7 SPD and 6.9 STR, the strongest being Hugo Moss. I don't even think I was able to really push him in the fights, he is a major bastard, but he was definitely strong. Till my fight with Hugo a few days ago, I thought I was pushing him, but I was terribly wrong. I had a breakthrough in my buffs while I was in Wolf's Wood the day before this fight. Now my buffs provided 1.5 stats, my speed was 4.2, and my strength was 4. I thought Hugo had 6.9 speed and 7.3 strength, but I knew even with my buffs, I would still be defeated by him. I thought at least today I would be defeated without being crushed. He was still winning, but he suddenly showed a higher power when he couldn't crush me in combat. 7.3 speed and 7.8 power, and I don't think that's his peak either. He was serious, but he wasn't trying to kill me. I didn't see him as a scumbag because he defeated me. As I said, I was losing to all the knights, but this bastard would keep striking at me even when I was falling to the ground beaten and almost always kicked me when I was on the ground, while no one was looking. It was very clear from his actions and words what his problem was with me. I was a commoner, and he was a member of House Moss. He was displaying purely classical minor noble behavior because they had to obey what all the other powerful houses said so that some bones would be thrown in front of them. Still, at the same time, they felt all those tail waggings were beneath them, as a result of which they would turn their anger against those they saw as weaker than themselves. He may be physically superior to me for now, but the fact that he was a tiny man in my mind would never change. Chapter 45. 284 AC. I was able to make breakthroughs in my buffs in these 6 months, not because I worked in the space, but because I worked in Wolf's Wood. Yes, the space's mana quality is much higher than Wolf's Wood's, but I realized there is something fundamental in Wolf's Wood that the space does not. Life, because there isn't anything else besides me inside the space. Its mana is pure without any affinities. Plants, animals, and all that vibrant ecosystem ensure that the mana of the forest is filled with the attributes of nature, thus making it much easier to grasp the nature spells and nature mana in the forest. Thanks to this, my buffs have improved even more, and now I can even shape trees thanks to Enratio, Entangle. I can't change the shape of trees very quickly, so I can't call it a spell yet. Right now, it's a cantrip. Thanks to this cantrip, I created a hut in the forest's center by bending the trunks of 4 trees and shaping their branches. The center of the forest is like a focal point, the mana flows from the outside of the forest towards here, goes back to the ground, and spreads to the whole forest again while feeding every root. I have a high affinity for nature mana, probably because I'm a druid. Because in the 6 months I spent here, I accumulated more mana than the mana I collected in a year, and now I have 91 mana. My mastery of 2 elements has increased thanks to this forest. As I said before, the first was the nature element, and the second was the earth element that nourishes the nature. R.O.B, mold plants, is the cantrip I use to shape plants. It is a cantrip, not a spell because it becomes increasingly slower as the controlled plant size grows. It took me days to form this hut, even a sloth can outrun the moving branches. R.O.B, mold earth, allows me to move soil or stones like the R.O.B. It becomes slower as the size of the soil gets bigger. But this one is not a cantrip because I can use this to break my enemy's balance. With this spell, I can move a maximum of 1 cubic meter, 35 feet cube, of soil. I tried this on animals, and when I moved the ground under their feet, they tripped and fell, even though they were 4-legged. If the moved earth is as small as the place where a person's feet are, the speed of the soil's movement is enough to trip a person. The next spell has become one of my favorites, Primiferous, Primal Savagery. Thanks to this magic, my nails turned into 3 centimeters, 1 inch, long razor-sharp claws. They were like the perfect hidden knife. Of course, these were still nails, they couldn't pass through armor or bones, but they could rip the skin and muscle. I felt like Sabretooth from Marvel while I was ripping open the belly of a pig I had caught, but there was a drawback to this spell. If I used it for too long, my hands started to hurt like hell. Because the human hand wasn't designed to claw things, this spell only strengthened my fingertips and nails, but the other bones in my hand, especially my phalanges, were still normal bones. The last spell was the Teganspi, Earth Spike, which, as the name suggests, was an offensive spell. It was much weaker than Tegondan, Earth Shard, in terms of damage, but there was one point where it was superior to Earth Shard. Earth Shard is a spell that takes time to reach the target and to form, but the Teganspi, Earth Spike, comes out from under the target instantly. It is very suitable for ambush strikes. Another breakthrough was within the range of Promodines, Locate Animals, and R.O.B, Locate Plants, spells. While it used to work only in a 1 kilometer area, it has now increased to a 2 kilometers area, and I noticed another usage area of Promodines, Locate Animals, from these spells. I can use this spell to find humans within 2 kilometers. After all, humans are also a type of animal, so I can work on my spells comfortably in the forest. Previously, these spells lasted 15 minutes, had a cooldown of 30 minutes, and cost 10 mana, but now last 30 minutes, have a cooldown of 15 minutes and cost 5 mana. Since I realized I could locate people with this spell, I have been doing this before starting every magic training. Promodines, Locate Animals, Human. I felt mana coming out of my body like a wave. It wasn't coming in contact with anything as usual, and I thought it would be a comfortable training time today as well, but after a few seconds, I started to see glows in the spell's range. It showed that there were people in this area, and there were about 20 people as far as I could tell from the bright spots. The dots were moving around each other like busy ants, and suddenly one of the glows went out. I wondered what had happened. 30 minutes couldn't have passed, and they were not near the border of the magic field. These people were about 1.5 kilometers away from me. I could only think of one explanation for the disappearance of the glow: that person was dead. Then the reason for this high movement must be fighting. I had a sudden curiosity, but at the same time, alarm bells were ringing in my head. I wonder if I should listen to the voice of common sense and stay away, or should I listen to the voice of my curiosity and go and look? It was not a difficult decision at all, and the answer was obvious. Of course, I would go and have a look. It would take me a while to get there, but first, I sent Poe and Erebus in that direction and told them to contact me when they saw people, and just then, another light disappeared. I was running at full speed and was already starting to hear faint screams and shouts. Just then Poe made contact. "Daddy, we got to where the people are, and they're fighting. 1, 2, 3. 18, one of them died, now 17 left. No, there are 10 people. Stupid Erebus, because you only know how to count to 10, that is why you are saying 10 people. Daddy, don't believe Erebus, there are 17 of them, one of them died again, now 16 left." It felt bizarre. Poe and Erebus quarreling was like the fucked up version of Sesame Street. People kept dying, but they kept counting. I was about 100 to 150 meters away. I knelt on the ground for a while and connected to R.O.B with familiar sight to silence him and look at what was happening. This must have been a forest trail from Winterfell to Deepwood Motte. I call it a trail, but those in this world would call it a road. It was a path of uneven compacted earth wide enough for only a horse-drawn carriage to pass. Of course, someone who is used to the roads on earth will not see this as a road. When I looked around, it was a dreadful sight to behold. They must have been trying to take a shortcut and got ambushed by bandits. 2 carriages were standing on the road, and around the carriages were full of blood and corpses. As far as I could see, 13 people were still alive. There were about 15 dead bodies around. Chapter 46. 284 AC. It was a very heart-wrenching scene indeed. Almost all of the dead seemed to be merchants and their protective escorts, and maybe a few thugs could have died as well. But this scene was my first time seeing a corpse in this life or my old life. I could feel my stomach rise, for many of the dead had either lost a limb or had a cleft stomach. I couldn't contain myself anymore, lost my concentration, then lost my connection with R.O.B. As soon as the connection was lost and my vision came back to me, I started throwing up. I couldn't come to my senses for 5 or 10 minutes. After I calmed down, I realized that one of the lights representing people had disappeared. I immediately connected with R.O.B again, and a more disgusting image was in front of me. The bandits were raping the 2 women they had just captured, and I got closer to hear what they were talking about. "Why did you kill the woman, you dumb bastard? We could sell her to the Ironborns for a decent price after we were done with her. You're the real idiot. Do you have a death wish to get into trading business with the Ironborns? There's a reason those sea rats always say iron price, they pay in iron, not gold. The bitch almost took my eye out. What if she's dead? Her body is still warm, it still works." While laughing maniacally, he started to go towards the other woman and slowly pushed the knife in his hand into the woman's stomach while ripping her clothes. I don't know what happened, but all my nausea and disgust suddenly disappeared. All that was left was a flood of unbridled rage, but I was not losing myself in this rage. On the contrary, my conciseness was feeling colder and stagnant. The only thing that was out of control was that primal savagery, was cast even though I didn't activate it, and the weird thing was that I didn't spend any mana either. It feels like there is a thin membrane between this rage and my conciseness. I had a feeling that I shouldn't have let this rage tear the membrane and affect me, have to try and control this rage. I started breathing deeply and regularly and channeled my mana toward the membrane I felt inside. Slowly but surely, the anger began to subside, and the transformation similar to primal savagery, was slowly being reverting back. These human-shaped pieces of shit, it would be an insult to call them shit. At least shit can be used as fertilizer, but even the land will not accept these bastards. These vile creatures have helped me to understand much better the medieval world I live in. They have made me face again the reality of how dangerous and how wild a world I am in, and I had to thank them for it, so I decided to give this thank with the brutality that they love so much. I currently had 75 mana, I would spend it all if needed in this fight and won't let any of them escape. After getting within 70 meters of their location, I reconnected to R.O.B and carefully scouted the weapons they had and their positions. It was about 10 minutes before the end of Promodines, locate animals. Actually, it doesn't matter if I keep their locations in mind, and I just had to find the ones with ranged weapons. Of the 11 thugs, 5 were loading valuables on horses, 4 were scouts, and the other 2, I think, were supposed to be leaders because these 2 scumbags were defiling the poor women's bodies while everyone else was doing something else. Only 4 people had bows and arrows. Some of them could have concealed weapons like throwing knives, but from the distance from which I would start my attack, these would have no effect. I had to kill these 4 scouts before the others realized what had happened, for which I had to shoot each of them in the head so that they were neutralized without a sound. My archery practice for 3 years was really going to come in handy at this moment. I had to get closer as I had to shoot them all in the head, so I came to a distance of 40 to 50 meters and took my place behind the bushes. When I stood up, all 4 watchmen would be in my direct line of sight from this point. They couldn't see me because of the bushes, and the sounds of Poe and R.O.B murders made the sounds of my movement unnoticeable in all of that cawing. I'm really good at fast shooting, but since my hands are still small and I haven't reached the physical peak, I could only hold 2 more arrows at hand, except for the arrow knocked on the bow. I prepared myself for the fact that moments later, I would be killing people even if they were criminals. I took a deep breath and cast the Promodines, locate animals, spell again because it was about 5 minutes before it expired. After one last deep breath, I drew the bow and, as I jumped to my feet, sent the 3 arrows to my target one after the other. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 3 arrows had reached their target almost simultaneously and instantly took all 3 lives. I had just taken 3 more arrows from the quiver on the left side of my waist when one of the bandits carrying valuables saw one of the dead scouts and shouted out loud. Ambush! Suddenly, they hid behind trees and carriages, trying to determine where the attacks were coming from. Thanks to my superior eyes, a distance of 50 meters seemed like a distance of 5 to 10 meters. So, I could see the other archer hiding behind one of the trees and trying to look around from there, but it didn't seem possible for me to shoot him. Just then, something occurred to me. I knocked an arrow into my bow, aimed at the tree from the side the archer was trying to look at, and let the arrow go. Swoosh! The arrow glided quickly and tangentially struck this tree, causing large pieces of bark to shatter and spread. Since these pieces were on the side the archer was trying to look at, these small pieces of wood had pierced the right side of the man's face. The archer screamed in pain and stepped from his hiding place without noticing. Right at that moment, I put an arrow through his chest. But while I was focusing on the archer, the other bandits must have found my estimated location as they were attacking from both sides, trying to surround me. As soon as I realized this, I also started to change location. First, I fired an arrow toward the leaders and gave away my location so they would focus on this position, then immediately changed my place by running around them in a wide arc. But I ordered all my crows and ravens to cackle and flew at close range to the bandits so they would not hear my movement because of all the birds' sounds. Chapter 47. Thanks to Promodines, Locate Animals, I could see the location of each one very clearly. I was going around them at a wide angle, and they were starting to close toward my previous position. There were only 7 left, and I still had 65 mana, which meant 6 level 2 spells or 12 level 1 spells. I started to smile slyly. They had no chance. While they thought they were surrounding me, I passed behind them from the left. The duo, whom I assumed to be the leader, did not follow behind me. They were looking this way from behind the carriages, but they were not approaching the wood line and stayed on the road. The death of 4 men in a few seconds must have made them think there was more than one archer, or they were complete cowards. Let's get them to shit a little more. Sambrar, fog cloud. The spot where all 5 bandits started to gather was suddenly covered in fog. I could hear their screams of surprise and fear, and I could also see them trying to find each other, almost blindly, as I opened my heat vision. I started making a Tegondan, earth shard, in each hand, but I kept their shape round so that when I cast the spell, it wouldn't pierce through their bodies, but when makes contact, it would catapult them back with a crushed rib cage. Because I made them round, they looked like 30 centimeters, 12 inches, diameter cannonballs. I fired both spells, and it took for a second to reach the target. One was shot right in the chest, while the other was shot in the back, but the result was the same. Accompanied by the sounds of broken bones, they flew about 10 to 15 meters in the direction of the carriages, and with this acceleration, they crashed into a few trees, and their corpses turned into a bag of mangled meat. As the remaining 3 men in the fog did not see what had happened to their 2 friends, they had no idea what to expect or be wary of. Still, the 2 of them by the carriages had clearly watched in horror as the corpses flew off with large boulders, smashed into trees, and turned into a mangled sacks. Damn it, what's going on here? What threw them this far? We have to get out of here. Let's run away while the goddamn thing in that fog is occupied with the others. Both of them were getting ready to get on the horses, and they loaded the stolen goods and ready to escape. Thanks to the heat sight and Promodines, Locate Animals, I could follow the other side of the fog and even what the duo was doing about 30 meters away, and it was clear that they were about to escape. I'm sorry, but I can't just allow you to leave like that. We are having so much fun. I quickly started running towards them, and just as they were about to get on their horses and run away, I was able to get within 20 meters and cast a spell in no time. Udrests, command animal, horse, Udrests, command animal, horse. Drop them and run. As I had ordered, the horses were suddenly going crazy and trying to throw their riders off them. It was almost like watching a rodeo, but I couldn't get caught up in it because I could sense through the heat sight 2 of the other guys spotted me and were coming towards me. When I turned around, I could see they were both running toward me, and they had hideous smiles on their faces. These 2 idiots didn't realize that I was responsible for the deaths, and they were probably coming to take me hostage. When they came to a distance of almost 10 meters, they were running side by side, and I couldn't help but seize that opportunity. Perseus, fireball! When I threw the fireball that formed in my hand, the next second, it exploded on the face of the man running on the left. This small explosion caused the man running next to him to flinch, lose his balance, and fall to the ground. As soon as I threw the fireball, I took my bow from my back, knocked an arrow, and shot the man on the ground through his leg. The man was screaming in pain while swearing non-stop. As he continued screaming, I knocked another arrow and put this one through his shoulder. I made this man suffer like this because I didn't want to waste mana on the last man, and I wanted to use all my remaining mana on the 2 leaders. So, I didn't have any mana to spare to kill the last one. After falling off their horses, both leaders preferred to run away instead of fighting. I would have preferred them to stay and fight, but running away won't change anything because R.O.B was following them with his murder. I crouched behind a bush, waiting for the man to emerge from the fog. When I saw him approaching the edge of the fog, I aimed to shoot him right away, but the man was suddenly hiding behind one of the trees, trying to look toward the screaming man. The last one looks a bit smart, didn't come running out of the fog like these 2 idiots. Po, can you order some of your murder to get the man hiding behind the tree out of there? Of course, Daddy. She begins cawing, and a few crows and ravens start flying toward the man. It was a little funny when I saw the raven and the crows diving and pecking at the man, but the man swung his sword and fist and killed a few. Something happened that made me never forget this man. It proved that a crow or a raven should never be killed in front of a large flock. When the dead bird hit the ground, 20 to 30 birds took off from the trees and attacked the man. Yes, 5 to 7 of them were dead in this attack, but they were attacking without caring about it. While some were trying to gouge the man's eyes, others had ripped his ear and pecked wherever they could get, and the man fell to the ground in pain, but the birds followed him and continued to attack him until he stopped moving. Ravens and crows do hold a grudge, and they take revenge. Chapter 48. All the bandits except the 2 leaders were dead. Half an hour ago, when I saw the dead bodies, my stomach rose, but now I don't feel anything. All I felt was an unstoppable desire to chase after the 2 leaders and hunt them down. This must be what they call the thrill of the hunt. R.O.B and his murder were tracking the 2 leaders, and I could see them when I connected to R.O.B. The bandit leaders ran desperately, constantly tripping over something, and the bushes all around scratched their bodies. Both of their bodies were covered with small scratches, and they were bleeding thinly. Catching 2 adults will be a bit of a challenge, one has 7 SPD while the other has 7.5 SPD. But catching them will not be impossible because they are running with all their strength. They will get tired in 10 or 20 minutes and fall to the ground, but thanks to my buffs, I will have a stat close to them even though I can't be as fast as them. While my SPD and STR buff both give 1.8 stat, the stamina buff I just developed doubles my stamina. Valhen Kelly, aspect of cat, Valhen Tor, aspect of bull. As I ran like the wind through the trees and bushes, the thrill of the hunt grew inside me with each passing moment, making my heart beat faster and faster. With every breath I took, I could feel every heartbeat as if it was coming through a megaphone. I must have been running for about half an hour, but I didn't feel tired. Valhen Tor, the aspect of bull, is a really powerful buff. The 2 bandit leaders were resting, hiding under a tree from exhaustion. The effect of Promodines, locate animals, was over, and I had about 20 mana left. I didn't want to waste more mana because they were under R.O.B's watch. Since the bond between my familiars and me strengthened, I could now passively know their direction without wasting any mana. As I approached the 2 thugs, my excitement started to overflow, and my heartbeat was almost deafening. I would reach them in about 100 meters, and I could clearly smell their blood. This skill was a buff from my new familiar, Barris. After I bonded with Barris, my senses of smell and hearing improved tremendously. I could almost see the faint scents, like smoke trails of different colors floating in the air, and my stats also increased. I currently have stats of 5 STR and 5.2 SPD. The forest suddenly began to lose its color, and I could only see red. My hands and face were covered with a burning sensation as if on fire. Even though I got so close to them, I couldn't stop myself. POV band leader. What a goddamn day. However, how well the day had started, we had successfully ambushed a wealthy merchant caravan and had lifted loads of loot. What a beautiful massacre it was, and I was in total control, I could still taste their horror-filled begging for mercy. But 4 of my men were killed by arrows instantly, and the others were crushed under massive boulders. I don't want to know in any way what kind of creature threw those stones. I'm drained and can't take another step, I hope it can't track us. I turned to look at my brother, he looked like he was going to pass out from exhaustion. I kicked his leg. Hey, asshole, if you are not dead, let's get up. That's enough rest, we gotta go. I had already thrown out my spear while running because I didn't have the strength to carry a weapon anymore. I felt very exposed because I was unarmed. We were just getting up when all the birds in the trees started flying and cawing at once. This cacophony took over the silence of the forest. It didn't feel natural at all, something must have frightened these birds. I was looking in all directions and listening intently to the sounds coming from the bushes, but I couldn't even feel it coming. It happened in a moment. Something that I didn't understand suddenly jumped from one of the bushes to a tree, and from there, it jumped over me and swooped down on my brother. It resembled a human being, but at the same time, it had nothing to do with it. This creature was a wild thing. It probably didn't take a second for my brother to be disemboweled and for it to rip his throat out. Because of the shock I was in, I couldn't even accept the reality in front of me. I wasn't able to make head nor tail of this situation. All I could do in the face of this situation was freeze in terror. My body was not listening to me. I always wondered why the women and merchants who died under my spear didn't try to get up and run away and beg me unnecessarily. Couldn't they see I was enjoying every moment of their terror? It turns out it was for this reason that when a person is in terror, his body stops listening to him. I couldn't help but watch in complete silence as this creature ripped my brother apart. POVMC. I think I blacked out, and when I came to myself, I was on top of a ripped-apart corpse. My face and hands felt wet, and a metallic-tasting liquid was in my mouth. When I raised my hands, what I saw were claws. Did it happen again? Primiferous, primal savagery, became active before I cast the spell. I had a very different feeling on my face, too. I brought my hands to my face while being careful not to scratch my face with the claws, and what I felt was unbelievable. I had a snout like a dog or a wolf and rows of sharp teeth. What was happening to me when I realized that the liquid in my mouth was blood? It wasn't hard to understand what had happened to this corpse before me. At this moment, I realized that I was following 2 people and felt a presence behind me. When I turned back, I saw a man out of his mind with fear. If I didn't know what kind of psychopath he was, I could really pity this man. I'm seeing this for the first time in my life right now. The man's hair was starting to turn white with fear. He was holding his mouth so tightly as not to make a sound that his nails were beginning to cut the corners of his mouth. When he saw me turn towards him, his eyes widened, and he suddenly stopped breathing. R.O.B. What should I do? He was staring with such horror that I couldn't help myself from doing it. With my roar, the man screamed and struggled to escape. He barely managed to get up, ran a few steps, tripped, and fell to the ground. I quickly went up to him and tore his Achilles tendon with the claw of my right hand. When I took this cut, an incredible pain struck my right hand. Damn, I think I broke my finger, I must have pushed my hands too hard when I blacked out. Chapter 49. 284 AC. My hand was hurting badly, and the ache rippled like giant waves. While I was dealing with the pain in my hand, the last bandit was struggling on the ground with screams of pain, and he tried to get up and run away, but all his efforts were in vain. The Achilles tendon in his right leg was torn, and he could not use that foot. There was no weird bend in my fingers, indicating that the fracture was not fragmented or that it was a fissure rather than a fracture. One thing was certain, the medical knowledge I now had was sufficient if it was a fissure or a hairline fracture, but if my fingers were broken, I had to ask the maester for help. I know how to treat such conditions in theory because of the books I've read, but having theoretical knowledge of something didn't mean I had practical skills in it. I wrapped my right hand with a few pieces of cloth and branches so it wouldn't move and get worse. Wrapping my hand was not easy, and doing fine work with these claws was difficult. I couldn't bring myself back to normal as I felt lucid but, at the same time, bloodthirsty and excited. After wrapping my hand with great difficulty, I turned my full attention to the writhing bandit. Please spare my life, I'll do whatever you want. Let me serve you, please, I'll even be your slave. I'll bring you more people so it'll be easier for you to hunt, please forgive me. He continued to beg me endlessly as he writhed on the floor in pain. Why are you so terrified? What did you do when those poor women were begging you to spare them? My speech surprised both him and me. My voice had changed entirely, the child's voice had completely disappeared and was replaced by a guttural voice close to a growl. He kept whining on the floor with his head in his arms and wouldn't answer me. I actually looked a bit like a werewolf. I guess everyone wouldn't be able to respond out of fear if a werewolf had stood over them and asked questions. I looked like a furless werewolf, a werewolf without supernatural powers. I still didn't know why I turned into this shape, but this shape gave nothing else but sharp teeth and claws. My form might have changed, but my physical strength did not change. Let's get you a little more still, so you don't have to struggle too hard while I'm tearing you apart. Let gone, snare. Ah, please spare me. After I immobilized his body, I slowly and softly thrust the claws of my left hand into his body without straining my hand because I didn't want to hurt my left hand too. After stabbing him with my claws, I slowly moved my hand, and deep cuts formed. Don't worry, I'm going to give you the same amount of mercy you gave when your victims begged you for mercy. I will show you 1,000 times the death you gave them. Rest assured, a brutal and terrifying death awaits you. After torturing the bandit for another 10 or 20 minutes, my anger at him had subsided, and the sadism was starting to make my stomach turn. But I didn't want to give him a quick and painless death. That's when what happened to the other bandit occurred to me. Poe and Erebus, would you like to eat this man? Daddy, I'm not hungry. I, on the other hand, don't like human flesh at all. I never eat it unless I'm starving. Then order your murderers to eat, tell them to begin to eat from his limbs and not from his head. When I said that, Poe and Erebus started to caw, and soon after, about 40 birds on the trees flew over the man. The agonizing screams and groans lasted for about 10 minutes, and I rewarded him with a well-deserved death. He couldn't stand the pain and probably died of a heart attack or passed out because of blood loss. When I realized that he was dead, I suddenly felt a sense of relief flowing through me. The membrane covering the primal rage inside me was shaking and vibrating rapidly. I knew I could discover something if I touched that membrane, but the real question was, could I keep that discovery under control? I almost died 6 months ago because of the healing magic, so I didn't want to interact with this membrane until I reached level 3. The thing that made me transform and caused me to black out must have something to do with this membrane. Now that my hunt was over, calmness began coming over me, and I could feel I was returning to normal. The transformation of my hands was causing a bit of pain, especially when my face was reshaped. It really hurt. I mean, considering that the shape of my entire skull had changed, it seemed normal. While this transformation was happening, this pain suddenly gave way to a burning sensation. It was as if my hands and face were on fire. My body continued to recover as I remained calm, but the injury in my right hand had not healed. There was still a pain lodged in my hand. The bandages and branches had loosened and fallen to the ground because when my hand regained its size, it was almost half the size of a clawed form. Now that I had calmed down, I realized that this whole fight had left me tired, that if I had curled up on the floor and lay down, I could have fallen asleep. I hurriedly went back to the place where the caravan was ambushed. I couldn't let these poor people be preyed upon by wild animals, except the bandits. I didn't care what would happen to them. I made a deep and long grave at the edge of the forest using formodagon, mold earth, and neatly lined up the bodies one by one inside the grave, then covered the grave again using formodagon, mold earth. Sorry, but I don't have the time or mana to prepare an individual grave for each of you. I hope you'll be happy wherever you are now. Now I'm getting all your valuables as a fee in return for this help. Anyway, you won't need them wherever you go. There was a bag of jewelry, some valuables in the horse pouches, and 8 horses. 4 of the horses were tied to the merchants' carriages, and the other 4 belonged to the escorting guards. The bandits actually had horses too, but I ordered 2 of them to leave so that the leaders would not escape. It is better than nothing. I could cash them out in Winter Town. Chapter 50. 284 AC. I didn't even have enough strength to go to my hut in the forest, but I didn't want to sleep here in an open field, either. Carnivorous animals will soon come here, considering the corpses lying around. After about 100 or 200 meters away from the area where the bodies were, I climbed onto a large tree and used formohba, mold plants, so that the branches of the tree wrapped around me like a cocoon. This will keep the wind and other creatures out and make it look like a densely branched tree when viewed from below. Of course, the horses indicated that there were people here, but it was almost impossible for them to find me. You never know if the bandits have other accomplices, being cautious is always good. After about 5 hours of sleep, I woke up fresh but starving. I had my sword and dagger at my waist, but I had no idea where my bow and quiver were. I still had it when I ran toward the bandit leaders, but I must have thrown it out when I blacked out and went feral. Since it would be tough to hunt without a bow and arrow, I chose the easiest method of hunting, using magic. After I found a rabbit, I immobilized it thanks to the Enratio, Entangle, spell, and all I had to do was go to it and cook the paralyzed rabbit. After filling my stomach, I sensed that there was a difference in my mana heart, and when I focused on the mana heart, all the mana in my body was suddenly drawn into my heart, and then mana suddenly spread through my body like a big explosion. For a moment, I thought I had made a leap to level 3, but there was no increase in mana count or quality, but pieces of information about a few level 2 spells were flowing to my mind like water. Illudo Gelmio, Warding Wind, was a defensive spell, creating a sphere of wind around me, deflecting the projectiles coming towards me, thus preventing them from hitting me. Currently, casting this spell costs me 10 mana and has a 20 minutes duration, but I don't think it can endlessly deflect projectiles for 20 minutes. It should have an upper limit, and I can't just ask people to fire arrows at me. First, it would be dangerous for me, and second, it would be so weird people wouldn't fire arrows at a kid. Perseus Egros, Flame Blade, the name of the spell, was self-explanatory, but why would I want to blaze my sword that would be a debuff and not a buff? If the sword is on fire, it means that every cut I make will be cauterized, which means that there will be no bleeding. On the other hand, if the fire is strong enough and the cut is deep and big enough, it might not cauterize the wound. It could be 2 times painful, it would need more testing. It may come in handy in dark places too. The cost and duration were the same as in the first spell, 10 mana and 20 minutes. Nocturvigio, Night Vision, this spell's name is self-explanatory. The only plus point I will add is that it does not blind the caster in case of a sudden increase of light like normal night vision. If there is a sudden increase in light while this spell is active, the environment becomes brighter, but it immediately adapts to this brightness without harming the eyes, costs 10 mana, and lasts 10 minutes. In Annie's Motu, Traceless Movement, thanks to this spell, when I moved into the forest, I would not leave any traces behind me. I would be able to move without leaving any traces of smell, footprint, sound, plant or animal disturbances. Even if I stepped on the mud, there would be no footprints. Even if I walked through the most skittish birds, they wouldn't be afraid of me, the plants wouldn't be crushed under my feet, and the bushes wouldn't break because of me. While this spell was active, they would all give way to me. The only downside is the second I show any aggressive movement, the spell will break. The upside is it only has 2 minutes of cooldown. It costs 10 mana and lasts 20 minutes. Protagonaries, Protection from Poison, this was both active and passive. It was passive for me, but it was an active spell for others. I don't think this is complete immunity against poison, it is more of a resistance than immunity. I have to do experiments starting from non-fatal poisons. Many bunnies are going to die for this. It costs 10 mana and lasts 5 minutes. The last spell was Mino Depuro, Lesser Purify. We can say that this spell is for filtering liquids, destroying all living beings in the liquid. Of course, this spell will not work against chemical pollution, and it will not be able to tell the difference between the chemical structure of water and other chemicals. This spell uses 1 mana to purify each liter of liquid. So, I can purify 91 liters of water with all my mana. There are still 2 hours until the sun goes down. I have to catch as many rabbits as possible in the next hour. So that when I get back to Winterfell, I can experiment, and I have to buy every kind of poison I can find. However, I have 20 kinds of non-lethal and nearly 20 deadly plant varieties. For the past year, I have collected not only medicinal plants but also poisonous plants. You never know what will be useful and when it will be useful. Being a hoarder sometimes works. Everyone was looking at me strangely when I entered Winterfell with 9 horses. I already had 1 horse and had become a large convoy with the 8 horses I had collected as loot. Although the guards recognized me, they did not allow me to enter without explaining the situation. When I explained the situation, I suddenly found myself getting scolded by Roderick.
Thanks for listening.